Welcome to Chinese Novel Audiobook. Chapter 21 Loud Arrow. On the other side, Colin is cleaning the stone house. No one had lived there for 10 days, and a thin layer of dust had accumulated inside. Fortunately, he had learned the cleaning technique before. Although it was not instantaneous, it was still enough for cleaning. Soon, under the influence of the cleaning technique, the house was tidy again. But Colin still had a headache. He looked at the brown wooden door panel that had fallen to the floor inside. This was the one Haywood crashed last time and has been lying here ever since. What it was like before the lockdown is what it is now. Nothing was stolen from the house, because there was nothing valuable inside, and some of it was locked in the meditation room further inside. He just had a headache. You know, he doesn't know how to repair the door, and he doesn't have the corresponding tools. It seems we can only wait until the beginning of the month when daily necessities are distributed and ask them to help with repairs. Colin thought. But soon he shook his head and chuckled. Maybe we can't wait until that time. Single quote. There is still 1 week before the end of the month, and he only needs 5 days to advance. After advancing, he will no longer live here. After thinking for a moment, Colin lifted the door panel and supported it with a wooden stick, barely blocking the doorway. So be it. After all, if you really mean it, this wooden door can't protect you. He walked towards the window by the sea and leaned on it. When he was in confinement, he suddenly discovered that leaning against the window and looking at the sea view had unknowingly become a habit that he couldn't give up. The sky was blue, the water was blue, and white clouds were in the sky and in the sea. He felt the caress of the sea breeze and felt refreshed. I hope that the place I will stay in will also have a sea view. It would be best if I could have a balcony, he thought to himself. Asterisk. 5 days flew by in a blink of an eye. In the meditation room, Colin slowly opened his eyes, and the gray wizard robe he wore moved automatically without any wind. With a thought in his mind, light golden particles gathered. Name: Colin Leonard. Level: Intermediate Wizard Apprentice, 1/100th, Grand Knight, 19/100ths. Meditation Method: Apprenticeship Circle Meditation Method I 25/100ths, Solar Breathing Method I 60/100ths. Witchcraft: Ignition I 52/100ths, Water Condensation I 41/100ths, Light I 54/100ths, Cleansing 26/100ths, Steel Armor 60/100ths, Shooting Arrow Technique 60/100ths. Skill: Elementary Witchcraft Crystal Production, Bright Crystal Production I Up Pointing Arrow 100/100ths. Breaking Limit Point 18. The curve of the corners of his mouth gradually widened, and Colin laughed silently. After a while, after he calmed down, a thought came to his mind. Suddenly a white light flashed and invisible armor covered his whole body. During this period of time, he has pushed the progress of steel armor and arrow to 60/100ths, which means they can be cast instantly. Colin carefully felt the difference after the advancement. After a while, he took off the steel armor, picked up an arrow he had bought before, aimed at the target made of kitchen firewood in the corner of the meditation room, and used the arrow art. The metal arrow shot out quickly and pierced into the firewood with a clang. In this way, he tried and compared every witchcraft he knew, and finally came to a conclusion. The most intuitive feeling after advancing is the increase in magic power. The magic power in the body now is at least 5 times that of the primary level. Even if he cast all the witchcraft he knew, only 1/10 of the magic power was consumed. In addition, although the witchcraft is the same, it obviously feels a bit stronger than the primary level. It is not difficult to understand. Advancement is like changing the core. Although the same witchcraft is running, the power output is completely different, and the effects are naturally different. The next day, the sky was dim. Colin got up early, packed his things, and prepared to go to the central castle to report on his advanced status. The weather is not very good today. Looking at the clouds, it is expected to rain soon. The wizarding territory is a square as a whole, with a huge castle in the middle, where the Lap Wizard lives. Usually after advancing, you go to the first floor of the castle to report to the instructor on duty. The residential area for junior apprentices is on the edge of the wizarding territory, about a 10-minute walk from the central castle. Colin didn't know what the arrangements would be after he advanced, so he didn't rush to pack up everything this time. He just took needles and some metal arrows for self-defense. Walking on the road, the residential area is still deserted. The stone houses here are not densely built, and there are a lot of them, about 200 to 300. But now there are probably less than 100 people living here, and most of them are still busy studying and practicing. So often you can't even see anyone on the road. Colin walked quickly along the main road in the middle of the residential area. As he passed an alley, he couldn't help but pause for a moment. This seems to be the alley where Jeff was beaten last time. Single quote. He thought of Charlie's abnormality, and the idea of going in and taking a look came to his mind. But soon, he shook his head and decided to move on. At this moment, a scream suddenly came from behind. Colin's pupils shrank, and at the critical moment, he suddenly pounced to the right, and at the same time, with a thought, he used the steel armor. Boom! But the flying arrows were so fast that even the agility of the knight could not completely dodge them. The arrow grazed the outside of his left arm, and the unformed translucent steel armor flickered fiercely, and finally broke. The remnant power of the arrow even destroyed the knight's blood armor, leaving a shallow wound on the skin of his arm. Colin looked back while using the steel armor again. Behind him, there was nothing but stone houses neatly arranged on both sides. There was no one, and there were no follow-up attacks. He suddenly felt something bad and quickly looked at the wound on his left arm. The wound was not deep, and blood was slowly leaking out. It was a normal bright red color. Colin breathed a sigh of relief, but the next moment, a feeling of dizziness suddenly hit him. His expression changed drastically, a large number of thoughts flashed through his mind, his eyes flashed, and he fell heavily on the muddy ground. The sky was covered with dark clouds, the air was oppressive, and there was no other sound in the world except the wind. I do not know how long it has been. Charlie slowly stepped out of an alley, holding a scrapped crossbow in his hand. He looked at Colin lying on the ground, and felt a sense of joy in his heart. He waited for 5 days and finally waited for Colin to go out. If it weren't for the fact that the crossbow had only one shot and the success rate of the home invasion attack was not high, he would have chosen to directly enter the home and attack. He carefully put away the scrapped crossbow machine, feeling a little painful. This crossbow cost him more than 20 magic stones. Most of the magic stones he collected from other apprentices were spent here. However, as long as Colin can be successfully brought to the adults, it will be worth it. This disposable crossbow is called the sleeping crossbow. As long as it hits, even just a scratch, it can put the junior wizard apprentice into a deep sleep. And in order to deal with Colin's steel armor, he specially had sharp runes burned on it. Now it seems that it is worth it. Charlie speeded up his approach. He didn't want to be discovered by the patrol like last time. A burst of wind came. Phew. Charlie lost his balance instantly and fell to the ground. He looked at the big hole in his knee, and then at Colin, with a look of disbelief on his face. After a while, he hugged his right leg and groaned in pain. Did you shoot the wrong way? Colin frowned slightly and slowly stood up holding the wall. He originally aimed for the chest, but shooting to the knees was okay. After all, my head is still dizzy, and it's not easy to hit it. He looked at Charlie who was lying on the ground, hesitated for a moment, took back the arrow he was preparing to hit, and replaced it with a snap arrow that came with the seller. Hold it in your hand and activate the arrow shooting technique towards the sky. Phew. The sounding arrow quickly rubbed against the air and made a sharp sound. Charlie's face gradually turned gray, and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. He wanted to run away, but couldn't stand up at all. He wanted to fight back, but the severe pain made it difficult for him to use witchcraft. Moreover, the air missiles could not break through the defense of Colin's steel armor. Soon, a figure in gray robes flew towards Colin and the two of them from the horizon, the golden badge on his chest shining brightly. Chapter 22 Guards. Quote. Teacher, this is what happened. Colin suppressed his dizziness and told the gray-robed teacher next to him what was going on. Charlie on the side seemed to have given up struggling and sat there with a gloomy face. The gray-robed teacher nodded expressionlessly, and with a move of his left hand, he summoned the arrow that wounded Colin from a distance into his hand. Then he summoned the arrow that penetrated Charlie's knee and the crossbow hidden on his body, and examined them carefully. After a while, I made a judgment in my mind. He raised his head and asked Colin, "Have you advanced to a second-class apprentice?" "Yes." Colin responded quickly. "Very good." Although the teacher's face was still expressionless, his tone seemed to be gentler. He waved his right hand, and a white light flashed over Colin. Colin suddenly felt the dizziness in his head disappear. "Thank you, instructor." The teacher nodded noncommittally, and then glanced at Charlie coldly. Although the lap school has relatively low punishments for fights between apprentices. But this is only between equal levels. Now Colin is already an intermediate apprentice. For such cases, the school's punishments have always been severe. Charlie obviously understands this, but what he is worried about now is not being punished, but that his plan is discovered. You go to the main building of Black Castle and wait for me first. I have to deal with this side first. The gray-robed teacher continued to speak to Colin, then paused and added. I am the first-class apprentice on duty today. I will register you for promotion when I get back. Okay. Colin replied respectfully. He not only told the gray-robed wizard the process of Charlie's attack on him, but also told the whole story behind it. Obviously, the Mutual Aid Association and the elimination of members of the enslavement school in the gathering place mentioned by Charlie have attracted the attention of the gray-robed wizard. Judging from the reaction he just heard, he must have never heard of such a situation. This also made Colin more suspicious of Charlie's remarks. Not long after leaving, he arrived at the Black Castle. The Black Castle is a huge castle in the center of the entire wizarding territory. It consists of the main castle in the middle and the auxiliary castles connected on both sides. The whole is in an inverted U shape, and the entire wall is made of black stone. The open space in front of the castle was a well-tended lawn, with a flat stone road in the middle passing through it. Colin came to the door of the main building in the middle. In addition to him, there was a brown-haired boy standing in front of the door. He was about 10 years old and should be one of the apprentices who came after them. The boy looked indifferent, glanced at the black badge on Colin's chest, and did not choose to say hello to him. Naturally, Colin wouldn't put a hot face on a cold butt. Not long after waiting at the entrance of the Black Castle, the gray-robed wizard descended from the sky and walked toward them. Colin looked at the flying figure of the gray-robed wizard and couldn't help but yearn for it. If I guessed correctly, the gray-robed wizard should major in force field witchcraft. Hello, teacher. Colin and the brown-haired boy greeted in unison. Come with me. The teacher in gray robe nodded and said. The two followed the gray-robed teacher to the top floor of the main castle, outside a tightly protected room. Give me your ID badge. Colin and the two respectfully handed over their identity badges. The gray-robed teacher motioned for them to wait outside, then walked into the room holding two black identity badges. It should be to communicate with the wizard-led formation and upgrade their identity badges. Each badge of the school is made by the Lap Wizard himself and is bound to each member one-to-one. It is the only certificate for entering the wizard realm. Even ordinary people who are responsible for delivering daily necessities every month have special identity badges. This large and sophisticated witch formation is the foundation for the Lap school to take root on the island, and it is also the top priority. After half an hour, the gray-robed wizard came out with two silver identity badges. Then he led them to a quiet room on the first floor. The gray-robed wizard pushed open the door and entered. There are two other wizards sitting inside. Judging from the badges on their chests, they should also be first-class apprentices. The gray-robed wizard motioned to Colin and the two of them to sit on the chairs by the door and wait, and then walked towards the other two wizards. Milne, has another third-class apprentice advanced? The wizard sitting on the left asked with a smile. Milne nodded and said, well, one is 5 years old, 13 years old, with second-class qualifications, one is 10 years old, 17 years old, with fourth-class qualifications. The room was spacious, and the conversation between the two was not loud, as if it was deliberately kept low. The brown-haired boy sat quietly on the wooden chair, expressionless, obviously not hearing. But as a high knight, Colin could hear clearly with his keen hearing. Follow the old rules. The 10-year-old will be assigned to the guard team as usual, and he will be taken to receive witchcraft later. As for the 5-year-old, it's our turn in 5 years. The wizard sitting on the right interrupted, the apprentices who were promoted last time and the last time have joined you. This time it's our turn. Quote. This is not necessarily true. The apprentice who was first class and only 10 years old was given to you. I don't need to explain the gap between first class and second class. The three wizards began to argue. Colin glanced at the boy sitting quietly next to him, feeling silent in his heart. He had expected this situation. There are 5 levels of wizard qualifications. The 5th grade is the lowest and the 1st grade is the highest. The qualification here simply refers to the affinity for magic. It has an impact on the growth of wizards, but it is not absolute. In theory, even with 5th level qualifications, one can become an official wizard. The 10 years and 5 years mentioned by the gray-robed wizard should represent the years they spent learning wizard knowledge. This can be regarded as a manifestation of another part of the wizard's qualifications. And he, no matter who he is, obviously does not have good qualifications. After a while, the 3 wizards finally reached an agreement. The gray-robed wizard and the wizard sitting on the left walked towards Colin. "Come with me, I will take you to learn the advanced witchcraft." The gray-robed wizard motioned to Colin. The brown-haired boy was taken away by another wizard. Colin followed the gray-robed wizard with a calm expression. The two walked towards the depths of the castle. On the way, the gray-robed wizard lifted his hood, came to Colin, and preached to him. "It's different from when you were a junior apprentice. After you advance to an intermediate apprenticeship, you need to be responsible for different tasks. The place you are assigned to is the guard team." Colin calmly looked at the shiny bald head of the gray-robed wizard and nodded silently. He already knew such a result. Quote, "Teacher, guard team, what exactly do they do?" After a moment of silence, he asked. "The guard team is responsible for protecting the security of the city together with the wizards in the Black Stone City at the foot of the mountain. The ferocious beasts that escape from the dark forest, the security of the city, etc. are all under the control of the guard team." The gray-robed wizard answered. He paused and then added. "The main work in the lab school is divided into 3 parts: logistics, mining, and protection. The guard work is mainly carried out by the guard team stationed in the city and the patrol team within the wizard's territory." "Station?" Colin asked involuntarily. "Yes, stationed. The guards usually stay in Blackstone City." When Colin heard this, his heart sank. Chapter 23: Going Down the Mountain. The reason why the lab school was built on the mountain was not to highlight its status. It's because the magic energy here is the most intense, which is more beneficial to the wizard's training. This is also the reason why many wizards in Blackstone City choose to live halfway up the mountain closer to the school. If you need to be stationed in the city for a long time, it will obviously affect your cultivation progress. Those with poor talent will be assigned to the guard team. Colin understood. The logic behind this allocation can be easily understood from the perspective of the school of thought. This is obviously to put potential apprentices in the wizarding field to focus on training and improving their realm. Those who have no potential are sent to the city's guard team to hone their combat abilities and deal with trivial matters. For the school, this is a very reasonable distribution method. But for Colin, it was just the opposite, and he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. The guard is a good job. The gray-robed wizard saw Colin's thoughts and comforted meaningfully. "You have to know, the school is the actual ruler of this island." Colin was puzzled. Quote, "When you go to the city guard, you will know why I said this." The gray-robed wizard patted Colin on the shoulder and said nothing more. It has been 60 years since the Lap wizards came here, but until now, there has not been a second official wizard in the school. In his opinion, an apprentice with Colin's qualifications obviously has no chance of becoming a formal wizard. It is undoubtedly a better choice for them to go to the guards and enjoy life. The two walked for a while and came to a study room. It is said to be a study room, but there is only one bookshelf in the room. If you look closely, it seems that there are some duplicate books on it. The gray-robed wizard took 2 books from above and handed them to Colin. "These are the witchcraft rewards from the school. If you want to learn other ones, you need to use magic stones or contribution points to exchange for them. But because you are going to the guard's office, you have 2 more witchcrafts than the usual apprentices to use to deal with the polluters." He found 2 more witchcraft books. Colin took it and stacked them together, inexplicably feeling like he was receiving textbooks at school in his previous life. He took the book and looked at it from top to bottom. They were Detect Evil, Purify Evil, Hope Defense Field, Fireball. The first 2 witchcraft are additional witchcraft provided free of charge to the guards. Polluters. He couldn't help but think of the strange man he met in the city before. That should be the so-called polluter. In addition to wizards, there are many unexplainable phenomena in this world. The polluter is one of them. There are many strange reasons for their formation, one of which is coming into contact with knowledge that they cannot understand. The first thing apprentices like Colin learned in their first lesson was, never pursue knowledge too much. In this world, knowledge comes at a price. After taking the book, the gray-robed wizard gave him another voucher, told him the address of the guard hall, and asked him to leave and report before tomorrow. As soon as Colin returned to the stone house, it suddenly started raining heavily outside. He leaned against the window quietly, looking at the endless turbulent sea outside, speechless for a moment. The waves are surging one after another, and the loud thunder drowns out the sound of rain and the sound of waves. White seabirds are often seen on weekdays, but not a single one can be found at this time. The sky and the earth are vast, and the heavy rain seems to connect the sea and the sky, making it difficult to tell whether the rain is falling from the sky or rising from the sea. The rain keeps falling, but the dark clouds seem to be getting thicker. The stone house has fallen into darkness. Colin casts a spell to light up the crystal of light. Soft white light evenly fills the room. He sighed and prepared to pack his things. Hold head high. At this moment, a dull cry suddenly sounded. Colin stood frozen on the spot, as if his heart had been clenched, and it took him 2 seconds to recover. For some reason, the rain outside the window gradually stopped. Colin's face turned slightly pale, but he was not afraid in his heart and instead stepped out. The rain outside the door has stopped, but if you look closely, you can see that it is still pouring in the distance. Only this part of the island did not rain. It's as if an invisible umbrella has been held up here. At this time, people were coming out of other houses one after another, and they all looked up to the sky. Colin also raised his head. An indescribable shock. A huge whale is swimming leisurely in the sky. Its huge dark blue body blocked all the rainwater, forming a rain-free area. From time to time, lightning would strike at it, but it was like a mud cow entering the sea, unable to make any waves. This is a thunderstorm cloud whale, which the original owner remembered seeing a few years ago. It has a gentle personality and never attacks anything actively. Therefore, the wizard collar did not turn on the shield. Of course, it may not be useful if it is turned on. Thunderstorm cloud whales usually live in the deep sea. Only during heavy rains will they occasionally rise to the sky to chase thunder and lightning. This is a rare and strange sight. It's a pity that although the thunderstorm cloud whale looks leisurely and slow, but in fact, it flies at a speed that even formal wizards may not be able to keep up with. So soon, it disappeared from Colin's eyes. The rain started again. The rain continued until the afternoon and then gradually stopped. The dark clouds dissipated, the sun shone on the earth again, and a rainbow even appeared in the distance. Colin has almost put away his things. There is nothing to bring, except for a change of clothes, mainly books and bee needles. As for the knight's sword and armor left behind by the original owner, he planned to sell them at the market later. As his strength improves, the benefits brought to him by knight training are more in terms of energy. As for combat, it is still not as good as witchcraft. Even the bee needles on the waist are more of an ornament. Therefore, Colin planned to only practice breathing techniques as a knight and no longer expend energy on combat skills. After going to the market to sell all the miscellaneous things, there are obviously a lot less things in the house, and it is estimated that it can only be filled with a large bag at most. Colin got up and went to pack the last things in the bedside table. Inadvertently, he saw a brown letter and a piece of white paper inside. Colin looked slightly stunned and slowly picked them up. Touching the red and blue fire emblem on the brown envelope, he felt a little emotional. That cute girl with short blonde hair may have turned into a handful of clay now. He carefully placed the envelope and white paper into his gray backpack. Then he picked up his backpack, looked around the stone house, and then walked into the meditation room to stop for a moment. Finally, I came to the window and leaned on it as usual, looking at the calm blue sea in the distance. The sea is vast and vast, with white seabirds circling, echoing the bits of silver light rippling from the water. Colin let out a long breath, stopped thinking about it, straightened up and walked out of the house. After walking out of the door, he looked back at Erica's stone house next door. He paused, seemed to think of something, turned around and walked towards Erica's door. A few minutes later, he started again and walked towards Black Rock City at the foot of the mountain. He left Erica a blank piece of paper. It didn't say anything. I just briefly told what happened recently. Things about Charlie, things about the Mutual Aid Association, and the fact that he has been assigned to the guard team. By the way, I also gave her feedback that I had received a blank piece of paper and a letter. If I had the opportunity to go back to Lane in the future, I would bring the letter to her parents. It is getting late, and the sky is filled with red clouds. On the mountain road, Colin's figure carrying a bag gradually faded away. Chapter 24 Distribution. Colin walked slowly through the small town, followed the address given by the gray-robed wizard, and came to a rare three-story building in the center of the city. He was a little surprised. Isn't this the place where he and the Berkeley wizard exchanged the limit-breaking ignition technique before? After thinking about it, this is normal. After all, Berkeley should also be in the guards. Colin stepped in and asked someone. Go towards a room in the middle of the first floor. Before they even got there, they could faintly hear conversations coming from inside. The strength of the great knight and the intermediate apprentice made his five senses extremely sharp now. Recently, several ferocious beasts have escaped from the dark forest, and the colleagues there are suffering terribly. I heard that another wizard died, and it seems to be from the Perka gang. Another wizard died. Alas, the beast is getting stronger and stronger. I also heard from my brothers in the east of the city that the beach there is not peaceful every night lately. The sound of conversation was silent for a moment, and then continued. It's better to live here. There's a new dancer at the Giant Axe Tavern, you know. Tuck tuck tuck. At this time, Colin had already arrived outside the door and raised his hand to knock on the wooden door. Please come in. The conversation inside stopped, and then one of them shouted. Colin opened the door and went in. Sitting behind the dark brown wooden table were two intermediate apprentices, one fat and one thin. I'm new here to report. Colin walked closer and said calmly, handing over his certificate and school badge. Welcome, welcome, our guard team doesn't come often, you sit down first. A hint of surprise flashed across the face of the fat wizard on the right. He took the certificate badge with a smile, and said kindly. After verifying the credentials and badge, the fat wizard handed them back to Colin, and then continued. Colin, right, my name is Layton Jeremy, just call me Layton. Next to me is Jerome Elton. You can go get the equipment with him first. I'm going to ask Master Hongyan for instructions on where to go. After speaking, Layton winked at Jerome. Come with me, said the thin Jerome with a smile as he stood up. Colin nodded and followed him. The two went upstairs, and while walking on the stairs, Colin asked. Senior Jerome, I don't know where Senior Layton is talking about. The place to go means that you will work in that area of the city later. Blackstone City is not small. There are 3 guard stations here. One is the headquarters here, and the other 2 are in the east and west of the city. Colin nodded and asked again. I wonder what the difference is between these 3 places. There is no difference. The treatment is the same. It's just that the east and west of the city are farther away from the city center and not as lively and prosperous. Jerome paused and replied. Colin nodded, his face calm. The two quickly arrived at the room at the end of the second floor. Jerome motioned to Colin to wait outside, then opened the door and went in. After a while, he came out holding a black wizard robe. This is the guard's witch robe uniform. You need to wear it when you are on duty. It has constant cleaning skills, so you don't have to worry about cleaning. He unfolded the witch robe, showed it to Colin, and handed it to him. Downstairs. The fat wizard Layton was speaking to the witchcraft formation. Too few, 60 magic stones are too few, at least 80 are needed. What? Too much. It's too much for you and too little for me. It's not like you don't know how rare it is for us to have a new person. If I hadn't thought that we have a good relationship, I would have sold it to someone else. Do you know how many people in the west of your city want to be transferred back to the headquarters? Everyone else has given out at least 80. Okay, isn't it already like this? Don't worry. If you don't trust me when I do things, can I destroy my own sign? Layton closed the witch formation with satisfaction. In addition to the 30 magic stones allocated to Jerome, he also received 50 more magic stones. He took out his pen and spread the file on the table. Then slowly add Colin Leonard's name to the back of the upper city west section of the file. This was not the first time he had done something like this, and he was still frightened at first, for fear of being discovered. But now he is already familiar with the road, especially after dragging Jerome, who manages the files together, into the water. He is even more unscrupulous. In his view, this was a matter of no loss to anyone. He got the magic stone, and his friend in the west of the city was transferred to the headquarters as he wished. As for Colin, young people are not used to the leisurely life here at the headquarters. The west side of the city is more suitable for him. Not only the treatment there is the same as the headquarters, but it is also close to the dark forest. Not only is the scenery beautiful, but from time to time there are ferocious beasts running out of it to practice witchcraft with. The ferocious beasts are a good thing. Their fur, bones and blood can be exchanged for money. The group of people in the west of the city are much richer than them. The more Leiden thought about it while sitting in his chair, the more he felt that he had been thoughtful and no one's interests were harmed. This was obviously a win-win situation. I have received 50 magic stones this time, and I can go to the Giant Axe Tavern to have some fun. I just don't know whether to go find the half-elf or the mermaid lady, hee. Crunch. At this time, the wooden door opened, and Jerome returned with Colin. Leiden adjusted his sitting position, put on his gentle smile again, and nodded slightly after meeting Jerome's inquiring gaze. I have already asked Lord Hongyan, Colin, the place you were assigned to is the west of the city. He looked at Colin and said. Hearing this, Colin nodded calmly. Jerome beside him sighed. It's a pity. If you were assigned to the headquarters, Leiden and I would definitely take you to the Giant Axe Tavern every day, but the west side of the city is also good. He patted Colin on the shoulder and continued. It's getting late, so without further ado, take your voucher and go to the west of the city to report, otherwise you'll be in trouble when it gets dark. Colin took the new voucher and nodded slightly. The west of the city. Although Jerome had told him that the three places were similar, the conversation he heard when he arrived was not like that. The west side of the city, close to the dark forest, is obviously more difficult and dangerous. Another wizard died, mentioned in the previous conversation between the two made his heart even more excited. This place is no longer within the school. Without the protection of a large formation, the enemy would no longer hold back like Charlie and Haywood, and would not dare to harm his life. People really die here. Colin turned around and left calmly with the new voucher, sighing in his heart. Unfortunately, the outcome of the distribution is not something he can decide. Be optimistic, at least now you no longer have to worry about being kicked out of the school. Jerome also told him that every member of the guard team would receive a salary of 10 magic stones. If you complete specific tasks, there will be corresponding rewards. It's pretty good, at least much better than when he was a third-class apprentice. He stepped toward the door. Chapter 25 Lord Hongyan, subscribe to Chinese Novel Audiobook YouTube channel. Before Colin could reach the door to the archives room was pushed open, and a red-haired man walked in. Lord Hongyan. The two of Leiden quickly greeted respectfully in unison. Teacher Barnett. Colin also greeted quickly. He was a little surprised when he heard the two Leidens calling Berkeley. So Berkeley is the Lord Hongyan, they said. Single quote. Berkeley glanced at the three of them, nodded casually, and walked straight to the bookshelf on the left. Looks a little busy. Colin glanced at Berkeley's back and continued walking out the door. The island is so small. He didn't expect that Berkeley, whom he met by chance before, would be his current boss. Jerome had previously introduced to him upstairs. The logistics, security, and mining within the school were managed by 3 special senior wizard apprentices. They are stronger than ordinary high-level wizard apprentices, and are also called peak wizard apprentices. They are the 3 most promising people in the school to advance to become official wizards. The peak wizard apprentice who is responsible for guard duties and is the immediate boss of both the guard team and the patrol team is what they call Lord Hongyan. That was the Berkeley Barnett he knew. Colin gently opened the door. Etc. At this moment, Berkeley seemed to have thought of something and suddenly turned around and called him. He looked at the silver badge worn on Colin's chest with some surprise and said, "Have you advanced to an intermediate apprenticeship?" Quote. Yes, Lord Barnett. Colin frowned. Doubts arose in his heart, and he glanced at Leiden reflexively. Didn't he report it to Berkeley? Single quote. Looking at Leiden's unnatural expression, he seemed to understand something and added to Berkeley. Not long after I advanced. I was assigned to the guard team by the school. I just came to report today. Yes. Berkeley nodded and asked, "Did you receive the equipment?" Took it. Very good. I will work hard here at the headquarters from now on. As soon as Berkeley finished speaking, Leiden and Jerome's expressions instantly turned ugly. They all looked at Colin with pleading eyes. Colin finally understood at this time. He lowered his head, pretending not to see the eyes of Leiden and the other two, and said in a deep voice, "Isn't it the west of the city that I was assigned to?" Mr. Barnett. Berkeley raised his eyebrows, looked at Colin who looked confused, and then looked back at the two Leidens. "Sir, I seem to have misremembered and accidentally assigned him to the west of the city." Leiden explained quickly. Berkeley's expression turned cold, and there was a hint of anger in his eyes. It was obvious to him that Layton was lying. The guards always take turns in assigning their places. Last time it was the east of the city, and this time it's the city headquarters' turn. If you want to change to another place, someone must switch, and both parties must be willing. And in the end, you have to come to him to apply, and you can only change it after he agrees. Colin in front of him obviously knew nothing about this. He had never received an application, let alone approved it. Berkeley suppressed his anger and did not speak. He just continued to stare at Layton and Jerome with a cold face. Under his cold aura, Layton's quibbling voice gradually became weaker, and finally he could no longer withstand the pressure and spilled the truth. Quote. That's what happened, Lord Hongyan, I was blinded by greed. Layton lowered his head. My lord, I was also at fault. I shouldn't have protected him. Jerome also added regretfully. After Berkeley listened, he stood there expressionlessly, and after a while he slowly spoke. I'll deal with you two later. He turned to look at Colin and asked. What's your choice, Leonard, stay at the headquarters or go to the west of the city? Colin reflexively wanted to answer that he would stay in the city, but when he raised his head and met Berkeley's calm eyes, he suddenly changed his words. Quote. Can you tell me the difference between the two? Teacher Barnett. Berkeley looked calm, nodded and replied. If you choose to stay at the headquarters, it will be the same as normal, there will be no other differences. If you choose to go to the west of the city, the 80 magic stones Layton mentioned will be yours. Quote. His tone was calm, without any tendency, just stating the facts. Colin pondered for a moment, then asked, what is the difference between the west of the city and the center of the city? Teacher, I heard before that the west of the city is particularly dangerous, and even wizards died there. Quote. The west part of the city is not as prosperous as the city. Taverns and restaurants are rare, but it is closer to the magic veins than the city, and the concentration of magic energy is higher. Because we are close to the dark forest, ferocious beasts will run out from time to time. It is indeed dangerous, but ferocious beasts are good targets for practicing witchcraft. As for what you said about wizards dying, it's true, but there are very few casualties among our guard members. For newcomers like you, there will be a buffer time of 1 month. You don't need to do anything during this month, you just need to send the school to the 4 wizarding societies. After you learn how to do it, you start to be responsible for patrolling, and you usually work with the old apprentices at the beginning. Berkeley paused and then added. Of course, this does not mean that you will not encounter life-threatening danger. Like I said, the guards rarely suffer casualties, but it is not impossible. Colin thought quietly, and soon he made a choice. He looked at Berkeley and said calmly, I choose the west side of the city, Lord Barnett. After listening to so many introductions, he already had a clear understanding of the differences between the middle of the city and the west of the city. In the past, he would have preferred to retire in the city, but now his thoughts are completely different. Strength is the foundation of this world. To give up the pursuit of power is to commit suicide slowly. The low concentration of magic energy in the city was intolerable to him. What he hesitated before was the danger in the west of the city. But now after Berkeley explained it carefully, he understood that the west side of the city was not as dangerous as he imagined. Most of the dead were probably wizards from other forces, maybe just junior wizard apprentices. As an intermediate wizard apprentice of the school, and he also had gold paper, he wanted to be cautious and not lose his life. What's more, if he chooses to stay in the city, wouldn't he lose 80 magic stones in vain? 80 magic stones is not a small amount, and Colin has never been exposed to so many magic stones. Although he doesn't need so many magic stones yet, the more magic stones the better. From the current point of view, at least if gold paper bright crystal production I wants to break the limit again, the limit breaking points required have been directly increased 10 times. If the other second limits are also multiplied by 10 times, then it won't be long before he is in a situation where he is short of magic stones. Therefore, he should prepare to accumulate magic stones as soon as possible. After hearing Colin's choice, Berkeley nodded and said nothing more. He just told Layton to take out 80 magic stones and hand them to him. Colin was a little surprised. Berkeley now directly asked Layton to give him the magic stone, which undoubtedly saved him a lot of trouble. Layton took out his money bag with some pain, took out 80 magic stones and handed them to Colin. Colin took the magic stone calmly and glanced at Layton. Layton's face was full of physical pain, but other than that, he seemed to have no other emotions. Thank you, Lord Hongyan, I will go to the west of the city to report first. Colin turned his head and looked at Berkeley and said. You go ahead. Berkeley nodded. Colin opened the door and walked out. It was getting late, so he had to hurry up and report to the west of the city. Chapter 26 Golden. After arriving at the guard station in the west of the city, it was almost evening. He was received by the burly head of the guard city west. There are a total of 5 senior wizard apprentices in the west of the city. Except for this burly minister, the other 4 serve as captains. The minister's name was Barton Keith, and he took Colin to a house on the corner of the 2nd floor. Then he was told to stay here for the first month and practice witchcraft peacefully, and someone would be responsible for providing food. Wait for a month to pass before assigning him a position. Barton's attitude was gentle and calm, and he didn't seem to care that he had replaced an old member. But before leaving, he asked him to learn the 2 witchcrafts of Hope's defensive force field and fireball as soon as possible. Colin responded quickly and nodded to express his thanks. Putting down his backpack, he looked at the room in front of him. The room is not big, about 1/3 of the stone house we lived in before. However, since there are only bedrooms and bathrooms, it seems quite spacious. It is fully qualified as a temporary residence. Colin walked slowly to the window. The windows are still wooden, but the familiar blue sea is no longer visible. He stuck his head out. What you see is a variety of low-rise buildings. On the left is the direction toward the outside of the city. The farther you go, the more buildings you see like palm huts and seaweed mud houses. They are densely packed and layered, extending into the distance, and are finally blocked by the looming yellow city wall. The right side is towards the center of the city. The further inside, the more regular the buildings are. Brown wooden houses and gray and black stone houses gradually replace thatched mud houses and become the majority. I stood leaning against the window for a while, and the sun slowly sank. It was getting late, and the surroundings were getting dark. The buildings in the center of the city on the right have been lit up with yellow lights. Although they are not as colorful as the neon lights in the previous life, they are still full of fireworks. Looking to the left outside the city, there were only sporadic fire lights, and most of the buildings were dark. The same was true all around, with only scattered houses lighting up lights. No wonder everyone wants to stay at the headquarters. Colin sighed silently in his heart. Then he withdrew his gaze and began to practice. Asterisk. 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 Time flies, and January passes in the blink of an eye. Early morning. Colin sat on the carpet beside the bed, and with a thought, he summoned the gold paper. Pale golden particles gathered. Name: Colin Leonard. Level: Intermediate Wizard Apprentice, 2 100ths, Grand Knight 29 100ths. Meditation Method: Apprenticeship Circle Meditation Method I 35 100ths, Solar Breathing Method I 75 100ths. Witchcraft: 0 level Magic. Ignition I up pointing arrow, 100 100ths. Water Condensation I up pointing arrow, 100 100ths. Light I up pointing arrow, 100 100ths. Cleansing I up pointing arrow, 100 100ths. 0 level Witchcraft: Steel Armor up pointing arrow, 100 100ths. Arrow up pointing arrow, 100 100ths. Secondary High Temperature Resistance 35 100ths. Hope Defense Field 32 100ths. Fireball 43 100ths. Detect Evil 26 100ths. Purify Evil Energy 18 100ths. Skill: Elementary Witchcraft Crystal Production, Bright Crystal Production I up pointing arrow, 100 100ths. Breaking Limit Point 18. As Barton ordered, Colin did not go out once during this entire month, but only studied witchcraft painstakingly in his room. After advancing to the intermediate wizard apprenticeship, he obviously felt that learning witchcraft was easier than before. In just 1 month, he not only raised the limit-breaking ignition technique to the limit again, but also successfully raised the 2 witchcraft skills he had mastered before, steel armor and arrow shooting, to the limit. In addition, the 4 witchcraft issued by the school and the secondary high-temperature tolerance witchcraft obtained from the previous exchange with Berkeley have also been introduced. The only pity is that after advancing to the intermediate level, the progress of wizard training has become slow again. But fortunately, progress has not completely stopped, and the meditation method can continue to break the limit. Colin recovered his thoughts and continued to look at the gold paper. Ignition Technique I, Light Technique I, water condensation technique I and bright crystal making I. These witchcrafts that break the limit at once are incompatible with other witchcrafts on the gold paper, and they all glow with a circle of blue outline light. The up-pointing arrow symbol behind them now has a golden outline of light. This means that the limit can be broken again. The up-pointing arrow symbol behind the steel armor and arrow technique is also the same as when the ignition technique reached its limit, with a circle of blue light appearing. Does blue represent breaking the limit once, and gold means breaking the limit twice? Colin secretly speculated in his mind. But he immediately looked at the cleaning technique that had also reached its limit. The up-pointing arrow symbol behind it is shrouded in a circle of golden light. Colin frowned, feeling a little confused. I thought about it for a long time but couldn't come up with a reasonable explanation. So he raised his eyebrows and focused on the up-pointing arrow symbol after cleaning. On the gold paper, the characters representing the cleansing technique slowly blurred, and soon transformed into a new appearance. Cleaning technique up-pointing arrow, 100/100ths, cleaning technique, gold. Colin was startled. A limit-breaking cleansing technique was followed by the word, gold, instead of, I. Could this mean that the cleansing technique has reached its limit? Single quote. He recalled the information that came to mind when the golden paper first appeared. Before the limit, every practice will make progress. After reaching the limit, you can use the limit breaking point to break the limit and continue to improve. After chewing some, he secretly speculated. Perhaps it is limited by one's own knowledge or realm. Different witchcraft has different number of times to break the limit. And gold means reaching the limit that can be improved now. Single quote. He understood the golden cleansing technique carefully. After a while, he stood up and used the golden cleaning technique on the bed that had just been cleaned this morning. Like a breeze blowing across my face, the bed seemed to be brushed by an invisible hand, and tiny impurities fell away one after another, gathered into a ball, and were thrown into the trash can. Colin rubbed the quilt, then leaned over and sniffed it, and then raised his head with satisfaction. You'll never have to worry about cleaning again. Single quote. Then he sat down cross-legged again, took out the magic stone from his money bag, and then called out the gold paper. Start adding points like crazy. Ignition technique I. Ignition technique, gold. Open black lens bracket water condensation technique I. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket water condensation technique, gold. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket light technique I. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket light technique, gold. Close black lens bracket. Steel armor I. Open black lens bracket arrow technique. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket arrow technique. Open black lens bracket bright crystal making. Open black lens bracket bright crystal making, gold. Close black lens bracket. Countless complex knowledge rushes into the brain. Colin closed his eyes tightly, and sweat soon appeared on his forehead. But there was no headache or too much discomfort. The transmission speed of knowledge was always within the limit that he could bear, and the overall situation was relatively mild. A long time passed like this, and Colin finally opened his eyes, feeling excited inside. He felt stronger than ever before. It's a pity, there is no place for him to practice witchcraft. He put the remaining 53 magic stones into his purse and placed them close to his body. This upgrade cost him a total of 45 limit breaking points. If it hadn't been for the unexpected fortune of 80 magic stones, relying on the 18 limit breaking points he had accumulated, it would have been impossible to have the luxury of breaking all the witchcraft limits. Looking at the rows of dazzling golden characters on the gold paper, Colin felt comfortable and happy. After all, the magic stone is something external to the body, and the enhanced power belongs to you forever. Chapter 27 Follow-up. It's approaching noon. Tuck tuck tuck. There was a knock on the door. The food delivery person should have arrived. Single quote. Colin put down the bee needle, stood up and went to open the door. He was testing the strength of steel armor I just now. Very satisfied with the result. If the previous steel armor was equivalent to 5 mm thick steel armor, it is now at least 2 cm thick. If he encounters the arrow shot by Charlie again, he probably won't even be able to break through his defense now. Crunch. Colin unbolted the door and opened the wooden door. Perhaps because things near the sea corrode easily, the doors here generally creak. Minister Patton. He looked at the burly man standing outside the door in surprise. Good day, Colin. Barton nodded slightly. It's been a month, how are those two doing with their witchcraft? I've basically mastered it. Very good. Detecting evil and purifying evil energy can be learned later. We in the west of the city mainly deal with ferocious beasts. In comparison, Hope's defensive force field and fireball are more useful. Colin nodded slightly, but did not explain that he had basically mastered the 4 witchcrafts. Barton turned slightly sideways, revealing a man standing behind him who was somewhat shorter than him. This is Holt Caesar, the captain after you. Holt smiled, with a gentle expression, fair complexion and no wrinkles. At first glance, he seemed to be about the same age as Colin. But upon closer inspection, it seems that the specific age cannot be discerned. Captain Holt. Colin greeted quickly. Holt nodded slightly. Okay. Holt will explain the next thing to you in detail, and I'll leave first. Okay. Minister Patton. Colin said goodbye respectfully. Barton nodded slightly and strode upstairs. Holt retracted his gaze from Barton's back and said gently to Colin. You should pack your things first, there will be more to do later. Yes, Captain. Colin walked toward the house. Holt did not follow him in, but slowly walked to the window at the end of the corridor and stood quietly looking outside. After a while, Colin walked out carrying a packed gray backpack. He looked around and found Holt's figure on the left. Although it is daytime now, the lighting in the corridor is not good. Only the windows at both ends and the gaps in the doors on both sides let in light. The window where Holt was standing faced the sun, and the bright sunshine shone on him. In a daze, Colin felt as if he was seeing a big tree growing in the light. Branches are sprouting, and dense green, dark green, large and small oval leaves are growing wildly. Soon, it filled every place in sight. His face turned horrified. The golden sunshine is still shining, but it reveals a refreshing chill. There seems to be no temperature. Shadows are everywhere in the corridor. The prosperous and leafy tree looks more like a twisted and ferocious black tree at this time. Monster. Buzz. The fuzzy model of Hope's defensive force field in his mind glowed slightly, dispelling the darkness. No shadows, no monsters. The bright golden sunlight shines in from the window, casting a soft halo on Holt. Colin was in a daze, his face turned slightly pale, and a thin layer of sweat appeared on his forehead. Captain Holt. He called slowly, his voice a little difficult. Are you ready? Holt turned around. Colin then discovered that Holt actually had rare medium long green hair. At this time, Holt also noticed something strange about Colin, and he raised his right hand. A gentle white light flashed over Colin. Thank you. Colin finally felt more comfortable. Holt nodded slightly and warned. Your inspiration is relatively high, and you can learn more about psychic protection in the future. Colin nodded heavily. The original owner has learned the relevant knowledge before, but he never knew that his inspiration was too high. The abnormality just now was probably caused by the energy field radiation that Holt unconsciously emitted. In the words of his previous life, he was in a nightmare. Fortunately, Hope's defensive force field is a defensive spell that takes into account both physical and mental aspects. Let's go back to the school first. Holt said, it's my turn to get the magic stone sent to the west of Moon City, so I have to go back first. The two went downstairs. Holt used a levitation spell on Colin, and then took him flying to the Lap Wizard territory. The speed of flying is indeed much faster than walking. The journey is very fast. The journey that originally took at least 2 hours to walk is now estimated to be there in less than 10 minutes. After all, a large part of the walk is uphill, and the road is winding and not straight. But flying is different. There are no obstacles and the distance is always the shortest. Before entering the school, Colin saw dozens of apprentices gathering inexplicably in the open space below. I had some doubts in my heart. It wasn't until he saw some familiar faces that he suddenly realized. Calculating the time, the 3-month deadline should have just arrived. The following should be the apprentices who are about to leave the school. Some inexplicable feelings welled up in his heart, but they were quickly blown away by the oncoming strong wind. The two of them continued flying towards the middle of the wizarding territory, and it looked like they were going to land directly at the Black Castle. Has anyone successfully advanced? The teacher standing in front of the open space asked in a routine manner. As he expected, no one responded. Line up, take out your ID badges, and come one by one. He continued to say calmly. The batch of apprentices in front of them are about to leave the school, and their identity badges naturally need to be recycled. Haywood took the lead and handed over the black triangular badge with both hands. Extend your right hand. The instructor took out a black disc, put the badge on one end, and pointed to the other end and said to Haywood. Haywood stretched out his hand and put it on, his expression calm. Relax your body. The instructor warned again, and then injected magic power into the disc. With the injection of magic power, the disc gradually lit up with a faint white light, but then suddenly dimmed the next second. There was a trace of panic in Haywood's eyes. The teacher frowned, checked the disc doubtfully, and then tried to inject magic again. Buzz. This time the disc lit up successfully, and white light enveloped the ID badge. Soon, the Haywood Moses written on it gradually became blurred and eventually disappeared. On the other side, the white light did not enter Haywood's right hand, and gradually came to his brain, preparing to eliminate the mark of the badge. But for some reason, it suddenly disappeared the moment it entered the brain. The teacher did not notice anything strange and just continued to shout. Next, Haywood retracted his right hand, looked calm, carried his backpack, and walked down the mountain without looking back. On the other side, in the Black Castle, Colin was listening to the gray-robed wizard in front of him. After a long time, he thanked him and watched the gray-robed wizard go away. He was waiting for Captain Holt on the first floor of the Black Castle to receive the magic stone. I happened to meet the gray-robed wizard just now. The gray-robed wizard was Milne, the wizard who flew over when Charlie attacked him that day. Colin just asked him about the final result of Charlie's incident. As he expected, what Charlie said was indeed false. There was no situation where the slave school eliminated apprentices in the gathering place. The school also specially called in many apprentices to check carefully, and did not find any enslavement. As for why those people believed what Charlie said, according to Charlie himself, it was because of the sleeping flower. Those apprentices were confused by the sleeping flower. The school has indeed detected the remnants of sleeping flower in their bodies, and now they have all been cleaned up. As for Charlie, he was demoted as a slave by the school and was eventually bought by Needham, the top apprentice. Needham, Colin felt a chill in his heart. The person to whom Anne sold her body was this peak apprentice in charge of logistics. He could still remember Anne's tragic final appearance covered with tentacles. Charlie, I guess he will too, huh? Colin suddenly raised his head in surprise. It really means Cao 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 has arrived. At the entrance to the first floor of Black Castle, Needham was walking in holding Charlie's hand. Exclamation mark. Chapter 28 Reminiscing about the past. Charlie was walking numbly behind Needham in his linen shorts. His exposed upper body was covered with dense wounds like centipedes. The limbs are covered with dark gray hair, and even the original golden hair is now replaced by dark gray hair like a wild wolf. Around the neck is a black leather collar with a black iron chain tied to it. The other end of the chain was in Needham's hand. Colin was silent in his heart. If he couldn't vaguely see his previous appearance from his appearance, he would hardly believe that this was Charlie. He didn't sympathize with Charlie, but he could not help but feel sad about the death of a rabbit and a fox. Quote. Good day, Lord Needham. Needham approached slowly, and he greeted him respectfully. Good day. Needham nodded in response, with an impeccable smile on his handsome face. It's just that his complexion is too fair, even to the point of paleness, which gives people an uncomfortable feeling. Needham kept walking, but the chain in his hand showed resistance. At the other end of the chain, Charlie stopped where he was, staring at Colin with extremely hateful eyes. Especially after seeing the silver badge on his chest, the hatred seemed to turn into reality, almost ready to bite people. Before that, he had already learned about the fact that Colin had successfully advanced. But he didn't believe it would be such a coincidence. There is no good time to advance, but it happened to be the day he attacked. He hates it so much. Even Needham's pain when he peeled off the skin of his limbs and implanted it into Wind Wolf's skin couldn't conceal the deep hatred he felt for Colin in his heart like ants gnawing at his bones. The animal blood had made his brain blurry. He couldn't understand the logic between all this, and he couldn't understand why he ended up like this. But in every sleepless night tortured by wolf blood, all that came to his mind was Colin's disgusting appearance. He just wants to one day be able to drink Colin's blood and tear up and chew every inch of his flesh and bones. Needham looked at the current scene with interest. His standing posture was relaxed, but he had a different kind of temperament. It was as if a well-dressed aristocrat was watching a favorite play in the theater. Quote. It seems there is some story between my puppy and you. After a while, Needham slowly spoke in a relaxed tone. He is an apprentice in the same class as me, Lord Needham. Colin replied calmly. Oh, that's it. Needham walked to Charlie and stroked Charlie's cheek, which now showed signs of wolf transformation, with his white-gloved hand. Come on, puppy. He patted Charlie on the cheek. Then he turned around and held the rope and continued walking forward. Roar. Dang. The metal chain collapsed instantly, and the steel seemed to make a sharp twisting sound under the influence of the huge force. Colin took a step back reflexively. Charlie in front of him had a ferocious expression and was yelling at him with his mouth wide open in anger. The skin at the corner of his lips had even cracked, and blood overflowed from the tear, flowing down the skin, condensing into small blood beads on the chin, and dripping on the cold and hard gray stone floor of the black castle. But he didn't realize it, and just stared at Colin with his turbid eyes that seemed to be stained with blood. His eyes are full of violent hatred. What's the matter, Lord Needham? Just then, Holt suddenly appeared. Team Holt. Colin subconsciously turned to look at Holt. But before he could completely turn his head, a strong gust of wind came from in front of him, and Charlie rushed towards him. Buzz. Colin subconsciously used the steel armor, took out a spear from his waist and held it in his hand. But the distance between him and Charlie was too close, and he was caught off guard, and he was still fiercely knocked down by Charlie and pinned to the cold and hard masonry floor of the black castle. Upon seeing this, Holt quickly raised his hand, and a green light flew towards Charlie. But then a white light suddenly shot out from the side. Laugh. Green light and white light collided and eventually annihilated each other. Lord Needham. Holt was surprised. Take it easy, Holt. Needham will put away the black iron chain that was broken in the middle with graceful movements. Let my puppy catch up with him. Don't worry about anything happening. This subordinate of yours is a great knight. Even if he is torn into pieces, as long as he breathes, I can ensure that he is intact. Needham's tone was gentle, with a look of helplessness on his lips. A critical smile. He thought for a while and added, what's more, do you think your subordinate can't even handle my puppy? Maybe he doesn't need your help at all. There was a rare hint of sullenness on Holt's gentle face. Although Needham said this, it was obvious that even he didn't think Colin could compete with his puppy. Holt is not hopeful either. When it comes to witchcraft in terms of life transformation, Needham is the number one in the school, and even the Lap wizards admit that they are not as good as him in some areas. How could Charlie, who had been transformed by him, be able to cope with Colin, who had just become an intermediate wizard? What's more, at such a close distance. Even if Colin is a great knight, it won't help. After all, the human body always has its limits. Aren't you afraid that Master Hongyan will be angry? Holt said solemnly. This kid knows Master Hongyan. Layton and Jerome, who managed the archives of the guard, were dismissed because of him. Aren't you worried that Master Hongyan will cause trouble for you if you do this? The smile on Needham's face remained unchanged, but a coldness flashed in his eyes. Although he and Berkeley are both one of the 3 peak apprentices. But Berkeley is recognized as the strongest. Just as Needham and Holt were at a stalemate. Phew. Fierce screams came suddenly. Holt's expression changed and he looked over quickly. The curve of Needham's mouth widened slightly and he turned his head calmly. But the next second, the smile on his lips suddenly froze, and his pupils shrank slightly. Charlie curled up on the ground in pain, with a large stream of blood flowing from his abdomen, which gradually gathered into a pool of blood on the floor. There was a bloody arrow on the ground not far away, which was obviously the culprit that caused Charlie's injury. Colin, on the other hand, stood aside intact. In fact, Charlie was not able to break through the strong defense brought by the limit-breaking steel armor at all. He was just thrown to the ground without checking for a moment. Finally, he reacted and found an opportunity, and successfully counterattacked with a limit-breaking arrow shooting technique. At this time, most of the violence in Charlie's eyes gradually dissipated under the pain. He struggled to stand up and slowly moved towards Needham, with his eyes lowered and a trace of regret in his heart. I'm still too impulsive. I blame the wolf blood. Single quote. His eyes were a little blurred, but the hatred in his eyes was boiling. Survive. There is hope only if you survive. Single quote. Colin. He tried his best to crawl towards Needham, with hope in his eyes. But the next second, his eyes, which were originally full of hope, suddenly dimmed and lost their vitality in an instant. Bang! The wolf's body lost strength and hit the floor heavily. Needham put down his right hand expressionlessly, then smiled. Useless dogs, don't deserve to live. Then, he raised his head and looked at Colin, who was intact, and bowed down to apologize gracefully. I'm sorry my dog frightened you. His handsome face has a sincere expression and a clean smile. If it weren't for his fair skin, anyone who saw him would have praised him, the sunshine of his smile. After saying this, he turned around gracefully and left, and Charlie's body was cast to float behind him. Before leaving, he also used a cleaning technique to clean the floor. Colin, who was standing behind, gradually adjusted his breathing at this time. He turned his head and looked at Needham's retreating back. He waited until Needham disappeared around the corner in the distance before slowly turning back. In front of him, Holt was looking at him in surprise. After a while, he then spoke slowly. Let's go. I have to take you to familiarize yourself with the work. Let's talk as we go. Exclamation mark. Subscribe to Chinese Novel Audiobook YouTube channel. Chapter 29 Noisy. At the bottom of the mountain, there is the Black Stone City Gate. The apprentices headed by Haywood have arrived here. In front of the city gate, there are also some wizards standing sparsely. They are the personnel responsible for recruiting these apprentices from the major forces in the city. Under their lobbying, some of the apprentices chose to join a certain force on the spot. Most of them shook their heads and refused, saying that they would think about it again. In addition to joining the forces on the island, the apprentices eliminated by the school can also become free wizards, that is, wild wizards, or wait until the caravan arrives to try their luck elsewhere. In the shadows on the city wall, a gray-robed wizard was standing, with the golden triangle badge on his chest shining brightly. After a while, after all the apprentices and the wizard responsible for recruiting had left, and no abnormalities were found, he left quietly. On the other side, Holt and the two also arrived in Black Rock City. He didn't ask Colin deeply. Everyone has their own secrets. What's more, Needham's dog didn't seem very strong to him. After arriving at the guard, Holt took out 10 magic stones and handed them to Colin. This is your first month's salary, you will get it from me every month in the future. Colin took it. Later, Holt told Colin to wait where he was. He will first distribute the remaining magic stones to the other 3 captains. As for his other team members, they will be distributed together when they are on duty. The job we are mainly responsible for is actually very simple, which is to eliminate the ferocious beasts that escape from the dark forest. Half an hour later, Horta took Colin outside the west side city. Here is a long and narrow plain, which extends on both sides next to the city wall. This plain is the most important food-growing area in the entire Black Rock City, and as far as you can see to the left and right, there are cultivated farmlands. At this time, there were many farmers working hard in the fields. Looking forward across the rice fields, you don't need to go too far to see the edge of the dark forest that seems to absorb sunlight and seems darker than other places. Holt pointed to a sturdy wooden house not far away and continued. What we need to do is to take turns on duty here. If the patrol knight reports that there is an invasion of vicious beasts, we will deal with it. If not, we can do whatever we want. Colin nodded. There are about a dozen wooden houses like this on the edge of the city wall. They are spaced apart and relatively far away from each other. After all, the farmland outside the city is long and narrow, covering a large area. Only by arranging the duty in this way can the danger of ferocious beasts be dealt with in a timely manner. The duty is based on teams, and the wooden huts between the members on duty are connected. I usually live among you. By the way, it will be our turn to be on duty starting tomorrow, the night shift. Remember to come to the west gate early and wait for me. Colin nodded again. Okay, you should have seen enough here. The next thing you need to do is find a good place to buy a house near the guard office. Holt stopped and continued. Buy a house. Colin was confused. Yes, if you buy a house, you won't want to continue living in the dormitory. Colin shook his head. Living in a dormitory was actually very inconvenient. Not only was the space small, but there was not much privacy. Then of course you need to buy a house. Not only do you need to buy a house, you'd better buy a few maids to help you with chores like cooking and cleaning. These are not expensive. A house can only cost 1 magic stone, and a maid is even cheaper. As long as you don't buy anything strange, 1 magic stone is enough. Besides allowing you to live in the dormitory for a month, we also considered that you might not have any extra magic stones to buy a house or a maid. Now that you have just received your salary, it is time to solve these things. By the way, Holt seemed to remember something again and reminded him specifically. You remember that the cook responsible for cooking must find a good one. Many slaves didn't know how to cook at all, and the things they made, you understand. Quote. Colin nodded. The island is short of supplies and the living standards of civilians are low. Their daily diet can be considered a compliment even if they say dark cuisine. Most people only know how to stew, and many people don't even know all the seasonings. Afterwards, Holt told him the addresses of the real estate trading office and the slave market, and gave him some precautions. He told him to remember to come here for duty tomorrow night, and then turned and left. Half an hour later, Colin came to the real estate trading office in the city and was warmly received by the manager. There are no pictures in this era, so you can only look at the houses one by one. Accompanied by the general manager and his team, he visited more than a dozen houses near the guard station in the west of the city. Finally, we chose the third to last stone house. This stone house is far away from the guard station in the west of the city, about 10 minutes walk. The stone house is a 2-story building with a basement. The area is only about 100 square meters. Although it is not large, it can be regarded as a mansion in Black Rock City. The people living around were obviously not from the lower classes, and were more or less related to the wizards. You can still see some wizards appearing from time to time. The house sells for exactly 1 magic stone. The houses in this world are not as valuable as the previous world. Of course, 1 magic stone is not too small, it is almost equivalent to 1,000 gold coins. After paying the magic stone and sending the manager away, Colin slowly walked to the master bedroom on the 2nd floor. The master bedroom was obviously specially built for wizards. There was a door on the innermost wall, which contained a meditation room of about 30 square meters. But that's not why he chose this house. He walked slowly to the balcony. This is a huge open balcony, covering more than 10 square meters, with gorgeous and exquisite carved railings. Colin leaned on the railing and looked into the distance. Past the rows of gray-white houses in the city and across the khaki city wall, at the end of his sight, a flash of blue caught his eye. He could see the sea, which was the real reason why he chose this house. The terrain in Black Rock City is not flat. The location of this house happens to be on a high ground. Coupled with its 2-story height, it just creates an excellent location for the balcony. Not only can you see the sea view, but because of the height, it is difficult for others to see into the balcony. After quietly admiring the sea view for a while, Colin turned around and headed to the next place, the slave market. There are many slave markets in Black Rock City, and Colin went to the one closest to him. It's about a 20-minute walk from this newly purchased house. Although this is not the first time I have walked on the road of Black Rock City. But he still felt a little uncomfortable. He is not a person who likes to attract attention. But now, no matter when or where he goes, he is always the focus of attention on the road. The last time I came to buy a sword, I wasn't wearing wizard robes, so the current situation wasn't so exaggerated. But this time he was not only wearing the standard wizard robe of the guard, but also the shining silver badge of the school. Passers-by didn't even dare to come within 2 meters of him. Looks like I need to buy a carriage. Colin sighed secretly in his heart. He was like a hot steel knife cutting through butter. Wherever he went, the crowd would automatically separate. After walking for a while, he felt something was wrong. I don't know why there are so many people here. There was also a faint noise coming from the front. Chapter 30 Numbness. This damn gangster can only bully us. Shish. You don't want your life. Well, the wizard is here. Just when Colin was confused, the crowd in front of him passed from person to person like dominoes and suddenly separated into a channel. At the end of the passage, a short and stocky man with thick hair was forcibly grabbing the wrist of another thin girl. Colin frowned slightly and continued walking forward. The short and stocky man did not notice anything strange around him. He smiled lewdly and whispered to the girl. To tell you the truth, there is nothing wrong with the bread made in your bakery. I deliberately wronged your mother. The girl pursed her lips tightly, her eyes filled with anger, and tears fell down her cheeks to the ground. Did you know? Your mother came here to apologize to me innocently, without even thinking about how I could let her go. The short and stocky man looked at the anger in the girl's eyes and smiled proudly. What he likes most is seeing them angry and helpless against him. If her mother hadn't been too old, maybe he would have kept her to enjoy the blessings of everyone. However, it's time to give her some false hope and get her. Just like before, if you get tired of playing with her for a few months, sell her to make a fortune. His tone changed. Of course, my goal has always been you, Renee, just promise me obediently, and I will buy your sister back. At this time, he finally noticed something was wrong in the girl's eyes. He turned his head slightly, and when he saw Colin, his face instantly turned pale. Grown-ups! He quickly yelled in fear and fell to his knees. Colin ignored him and walked forward. The short, stocky man felt relieved when he saw Colin slowly walking past him without noticing. Common people like them who are like weeds will die if they offend the wizard. No one will avenge them. Seeing Colin gradually walking away, he turned to look at Renee beside him. Perhaps he was frightened by Colin. He looked at Renee and felt inexplicably violent. He raised his hand and wanted to slap her in the face. The girl closed her eyes subconsciously, her eyelashes trembling with fear. Phew. But what fell on her face was not a slap, but a handful of warm, smelly blood. A metal arrow clanked and fell. The stocky man's eyes dimmed instantly, his raised right hand gradually lowered, and then he fell heavily to the ground. Colin looked away, and the remaining witchcraft power fluctuations in his hands gradually dissipated. He continued to walk forward, not taking the little things he did casually to heart. Although he is not a good person, but it is also difficult to avoid such things without any fluctuations. Especially when the rights and wrongs of this matter are clear at a glance, and it is just a matter of effort for him. In Blackstone City, the status of ordinary people and wizards is very different. The short and stocky man obviously didn't have any background either from his clothing or behavior or from the words of the passers-by around him. He didn't even need to explain to anyone, the guards would learn everything from the onlookers and then take the initiative to help him wash the floor. After walking for a while, he suddenly frowned slightly and looked back. The girl he rescued just now seems to be named Renee. She was far behind. Seeing him turn around, Renee showed panic on her face and lowered her head subconsciously. She didn't come after Colin. It's just that they went in the same direction. Soon, Colin also noticed this, withdrew his gaze and continued to move forward. After another while, he finally arrived at the slave market. The slave market in front of us is said to be a market, but in fact it is just a street. The streets were lined with figures. At a glance, in addition to young and strong men, there were also young women. They all had collars around their necks, and they were all ordinary human beings. Before coming, Holt told him that if he wanted to buy half-elves or other alien slaves, he would have to wait until the biannual caravan arrived, or try his luck at the largest slave trading market in the center of the city. Alien slaves are generally more expensive than humans, mainly because they are generally gifted with abilities in certain areas. But most of the aliens who are reduced to slaves are usually not very talented. Holt also gave an example. On the second floor of the Giant Axe Tavern, which only accepts wizards, there are some strange dancers in the center of the city, such as half-elves, shark girls, and catwomen. But the alien blood in their bodies is already very thin, and at most it can only bring about some slight changes, mostly in appearance. For example, half-elves' pointed ears, shark girls' fish scales, catwomen's cat ears, etc. Colin walked slowly along this street, his face calm, but his heart was somewhat depressed. Anyone who sees someone exactly like themselves being sold as goods for the first time will inevitably feel a little uncomfortable. The slave traders on both sides of the street didn't think so. When they saw Colin's figure, their eyes lit up, and they suddenly felt that they had a big customer. But they did not dare to shout and solicit at will, in case they would bump into the wizard. So, as if they had already planned it, they raised their whips in unison and whipped them at the strong slave beside them. This is done to attract Colin's attention and at the same time show off the slave's strong body. Snap pop pop. For a while, the sound of snapping could be heard endlessly, mixed with a bit of painful groaning. In addition, there are some slave traders who directly pull off the clothes of the female slaves around them, revealing that their bodies are obviously cleaner than other slaves. Colin couldn't help but sigh in his heart. I don't know how these slaves were trained. Their expressions were very numb, which made people feel very uncomfortable. The back of the long-haired male slave on the right front was gradually seeping with blood. But he seemed to feel nothing, standing blankly, his eyes numb. Although the female slaves were not whipped, their eyes were hollower than those of the male slaves, as if they had lost their vitality. Colin had no intention of shopping anymore, so he chose a store and walked to it. Chapter 31 Uncle and Aunt. As he got closer to the store, he couldn't help but frown. There was a black iron cage about 1 meter square outside the shop, with a girl about 5 or 6 years old locked inside. The little girl was sleeping soundly with a dirty rag cushioned in the iron cage. She opened her mouth slightly, and some saliva leaked out. Just by looking at her expression, one would think that she was sleeping soundly on a soft bed. At this time, a thin figure suddenly came from the left and walked past him towards the cage. He looked up and saw the girl he had just saved on the road, Renee. Colin's steps paused slightly. He looked at Renee, and then at the little girl who looked similar to Renee in the iron cage, and he suddenly understood. Get out of the way quickly, don't block the adult's way. The slave trader behind suddenly ran to Renee and urged. There are strict rules for buying and selling slaves, so what's the use of you coming to me every day? I'm just a worker, you might as well find a way to save money. When you save enough money, you can naturally buy your sister back. Quote. Then he walked up to Colin diligently and asked with a smile. Sir, I wonder what kind of slaves you need. I just got a batch of good ones here recently. Do you have any slaves here who can drive a carriage? Colin asked. Yes, sir. The slave trader replied quickly. Go and bring them out to me. Yes, sir. Colin looked at the slave trader who turned around and ran towards the back, stopped him again, pointed to the cage with the little girl in front of him and said. Open this cage first. Okay. The slave trader did not hesitate, took out a bunch of keys from his arms, found the corresponding one and opened the iron cage. Click. The sound of unlocking sounded. Only then did Renee react and subconsciously wanted to go to her sister, but the next second, she quickly knelt down again. Thank you, sir, your character is admirable, and your generosity will never be forgotten. Renee babbled, her voice was crisp but a little stumbling, as if she was not good at words. Get up. Colin waved his hand, interrupting her lame compliment. Go see your sister. Renee did not listen this time. Instead, she insisted on saying all the compliments she knew from beginning to end before slowly walking towards her sister behind her. Colin smiled slightly, although these words were just compliments. But who doesn't like to hear good words? The girl in front of me is a grateful person. At this time, the slave trader happened to come out with a few slaves. I glanced around and found nothing to choose from. After listening to the introduction, Colin randomly selected the oldest male slave who seemed to be the most reliable. He himself said that he was about 40 years old. According to the slave traders, he was also the best carriage driver among them. Sir, here it is. The slave trader handed the deed of sale to Colin with both hands. Colin reached out and took it. There were 2 in total, one belonged to the little girl Demi Lydia, and the other belonged to the groom Arthur. Arthur has no last name, only a first name. The 2 of them added up to a total of 50 gold coins, which was equivalent to 1/20th of the magic stone. Colin turned around and looked at Arthur, who was standing quietly in front of him. He thought for a moment and took out some gold coins from his pocket. You know how to buy a carriage. Take the money to buy a carriage and come back. Yes, master. Arthur responded. Remember the address where I live. I'll come right over as soon as I buy the carriage. He added. Remember. Seeing Arthur nod, Colin waved his hand with satisfaction, urging him to go back quickly. By the way, do you have any slaves here who are good at cooking? He turned to the slave trader and asked. He almost forgot to buy a cook. Yes, I will bring them to you, sir. The slave trader hurried in again. While waiting, he turned around and walked slowly towards Sister Renee. Demi was already awake at this time, holding her sister and giggling. There were tears in the corners of her eyes. It looked like she had just finished crying. Grown-ups. Seeing Colin approaching, Renee quickly greeted him. She had been paying attention to Colin's side. Colin gave a slight nod in response, leaning down to smile at Demi and touching her head. In his previous life, he preferred children, except of course the uncute ones and naughty ones. Although the Demi's skin in front of her was a little dirty, she still looked fair and her facial features were exquisite. She looked like an exquisite doll, which was very lovable. In this world, kindness is a luxury. But if he could do something random and good like this once in a while, it would still make him feel comfortable. After all, he didn't pay much. All he paid was some insignificant gold coins. Colin's smile was gentle and sunny, and he looked handsome. Demi was a little timid at first, but now she mustered up the courage to smile back at Colin. Colin straightened up with satisfaction. Sir, the slave you asked for who can cook is here. At this time, the slave trader also came over with new slaves. They are all women, all different in height, short, Fat and thin, the only thing they have in common is their numb eyes. Just like the dead fish sold in the wet market. Colin frowned slightly and couldn't help but complain again. I don't know how they were trained. These slaves are all as numb as the same mold. Others don't know how to feel. But as far as he is concerned, he has no interest in buying it. What do you know how to cook? He asked again. Sima. What else? Colin frowned slightly. Sima just adds water and oil, and stews the ingredients into a paste. Small fish Sima, mango Sima. Stop. Colin interrupted her, paused and said again. What can you do if I give you a goat? This. The female slave suddenly got stuck. She had never thought about such a problem before. Sheep heads are made into soup. The fat and lean mutton can be roasted directly. The leaner ones can be stewed with the mutton bones. Take them out, remove the bones, tear them into small strips, and eat them with seasonings. Lamb chops, lamb legs, and many other things. Way of doing. Renee suddenly spoke up. She looked at Colin with pleading in her eyes. Sir, I have learned cooking skills from my mother who is a chef since I was a child. I wonder if I will be lucky enough to become your cook. After the surprise of being reunited with her sister faded, worry swept over her again. Renee knows that, even though Demi is back with her now. But what happens after that? She had no ability to prevent Demi from being sold again. In fact, she couldn't even protect herself. Wizards are awe-inspiring and terrifying. Single quote. But my parents are dead, and I can no longer live as carefree as before. You have to seize the opportunity, take care of yourself, and protect your sister. Single quote. She stared at Colin expectantly, silently cheering herself up in her heart. Colin was startled, then quickly smiled and replied to Renee. Sure, she's just a cook, it doesn't matter who she chooses. The Renee in front of her was cute and pleasing to the eye, and from what she said, she seemed to have good cooking skills. Why does he hesitate? Are you afraid that Renee will take her sister with her? Colin laughed at his own thoughts. I am a mid-level wizard, but I am afraid that I will not be able to support two maids. Single quote. The cook Renee requested was not a hired worker. From the moment she became Colin's cook, she became Colin's personal property. It is also necessary to apply for a slave contract. After Colin took her through the slave contract-related procedures, he turned back and asked. Are you going back to pack your things? Quote. No, no need. Renee replied hesitantly. Sister, why don't you go back? I want my little bear. Demi asked softly next to her. Quote. Renee looked embarrassed and comforted. Sister, can I make another one for you later? Quote. Okay. Demi was obviously a little depressed, but still smiled and responded to Renee. She is an obedient child who never cries or makes fuss even when she is locked in a cage. Renee couldn't help but bend down and hug her. Is there any trouble at home? Colin asked aloud. Quote. It's nothing, sir. Renee. Colin's tone became slightly stern. My first rule here is that you answer whatever I ask. Renee was frightened by him. Sir. Quote. Don't be nervous, just remember next time. Colin's tone softened slightly. For ordinary people who are oppressed in this world, there is no need for him to be deliberately harsh and establish his authority. They have long had their class dignity engraved in their bones and blood. So sometimes being moderately gentle can win over people's hearts. Renee slowly explained the reason under his gaze. So the previous gangsters were from the Perka gang. You were afraid that they would wait for me at your house. Moreover, your uncle and your aunt have already occupied your bakery, so there is nothing to deal with. Yes, sir. Let's go, lead the way. Colin chuckled and urged. Renee was still hesitant. Colin wasn't angry at all, he just said. My second rule here is to be obedient and listen to me. Yes, sir. Renee nodded quickly. Colin said no more and let them lead the way. Now that they have become their own slaves, if they still had some troubles in the past, I can take this opportunity to solve them for them. On the one hand, it saves trouble later, on the other hand, it can be regarded as a combination of kindness and power. Exclamation mark. Chapter 32 Placement. Gentle sunshine falls on the earth. Colin is walking on his way home. Followed by Sister Renee. He walked at the front with a calm expression. Renee's face at the back turned a little pale, and she seemed a little hard to accept what had just happened. Demi, who didn't know anything next to her, was holding her little bear with a happy face. After they returned to the bakery, everything went as Colin expected. He did nothing, just stood there, and Renee took back the ownership of her family's bakery, eventually exchanging it for gold coins and keeping it with her. But there are two surprises. The first one is that the gang behind the short man he killed on the road today actually came to his door. He also sent a fierce and strong man to wait for him in Renee's bakery in advance. But he came specifically to apologize and even gave me a box of Naishu tea. Another thing is, the mastermind who planned to kill Renee's parents turned out to be her uncle and aunt who occupied the bakery. It was they who colluded with the stocky man to kill Renee's parents. This is why Renee is feeling complicated now. Thinking of this, Colin sighed in his heart. In this world, for ordinary people, perhaps having beauty and wealth is also a kind of misfortune. He inexplicably thought of his past. Once upon a time, after listening to Charlie's conspiracy theories. As a junior apprentice member who was not valued by the school, he came to Blackstone City and did not even dare to wear the school's identity badge on the street. But now, he has advanced to an intermediate apprentice and became a formal member of the school. The status is completely different from before. All this is because of power. Colin exhaled slightly. Not long after, they returned to their home on Palm Street. While returning home to Palm Street, next to the iron-clad wooden door, Arthur was sitting quietly on a single-horse carriage with a black curved body. Owner. After seeing Colin, he jumped out of the car, walked forward quickly and bent down to greet him. He took out the remaining gold coins from his pocket to buy the carriage and handed it to Colin with both hands. Colin nodded, took the gold coins, and then picked out 2 more coins and put them back in Arthur's hand. Thank you, master. Arthur looked surprised. Take it and buy yourself some decent clothes. Keep the rest for yourself. Colin said gently, then he looked at Renee and handed her 5 gold coins. You too, go buy some clothes for you and Demi, and use the remaining money to buy some ingredients for dinner tonight. He looked around Renee and Arthur and continued. From now on, you will be able to receive a salary of 1 gold coin from me every month. Of course, the premise is that you work hard. In Black Rock City, for an ordinary middle-class family, the annual income is only a dozen gold coins. 1 gold coin per month is obviously a high salary. It stands to reason that Arthur and the others are just slaves, and Colin does not need to pay them any more. But a few gold coins are not much to him, but they can greatly increase Arthur and others' enthusiasm for work and increase their loyalty. Why not do it? Opening the double iron-clad wooden doors, Colin walked into the courtyard of his home. The house he purchased covers an area of approximately 600 to 700 square meters, of which 500 square meters is the small courtyard in front of it. Directly opposite the main door is the main house, which is a 2-story building with a basement. It has a Western style and the details reveal its elegance. On the right side of the main house is the side house, which is a 1-story bungalow with a stable next to it. You guys can choose a room to live in. Any place is fine except for the 2nd floor and basement. Colin ordered. Sir, I live in the side room on the right so that I can take care of the horses more conveniently. Arthur took the initiative and said. Colin nodded noncommittally. Renee finally chose the room on the 1st floor of the main house that was closer to the kitchen. This was also the room where the servants of the original household lived. Renee walked Demi into the room and put down her luggage. There was no time to tidy up, and no time to marvel at the servants' room in front of me, which was even more exquisite than my master bedroom. She pulled Demi out again. She didn't forget that Colin asked her to go out to buy ingredients for dinner. Before leaving, she asked Colin for instructions. Go ahead and let Arthur take you there. You don't have to tell me any more except that you don't have enough money for every purchase. Colin answered, and ordered Arthur again. You also ask Renee for the expenses such as fodder required for the horses, and ask her to reimburse me for reimbursement. The two responded one after another. At dusk. Bang, bang. There was a knock on the door. Master, dinner is ready. Come in. In front of the desk in the study room, Colin concentrated on reading the book in his hand and answered casually. Creaking, the door was slowly pushed open. Renee held the silver dinner plate, walked gently to the table, and slowly put the plate down, for fear of disturbing Colin's reading. The tempting aroma comes from the tip of the nose. Colin closed the book and looked up at the 2 dishes and 1 soup in front of him. The soup is a bowl of vegetable chowder, the dishes are fried steak and boiled clams, and the main dish is white bread. Although it is not very exquisite, it is at least above the standard and far better than his craftsmanship. Well done, Renee. He raised his head and praised with satisfaction. After seeing Renee clearly, a hint of surprise flashed in his eyes and he added, "This outfit suits you very well, too." Renee in front of her was wearing a black and white maid uniform. The waist-cinching design made her originally thin figure look slim and slim, just like a blonde maid from a comic book. Her blonde hair was still a little damp, and it looked like she had taken a shower. Colin was also a little surprised. In fact, he simply thought that the clothes of Renee and the two sisters were a little worn out, so he asked them to add some new clothes. "But I never thought that she would buy a maid outfit." After hearing the compliment, Renee forced a smile. Although she was happy to be praised, she felt more uneasy. Although she was a little scared, she quickly exhaled carefully, adjusted herself, and straightened her body again. Fate brought her suffering, but also gave her the courage to face the unknown future. After making her choice, she was ready to accept everything, otherwise she wouldn't have taken the initiative to take a shower and put on new clothes. She tried to calm herself down and accepted Colin's gaze, but soon, a blush uncontrollably crept up her neck and onto her delicate cheeks. Colin smiled when he saw this, thinking that she couldn't stand the praise, so he came to the rescue and said, "You should go eat too, and just remember to clear away the dishes later." "Okay, master." Renee left respectfully, feeling slightly relieved. After she left, Colin took a bite of the food on the table. The delicious taste blooms in your mouth. He couldn't help but smile, feeling increasingly satisfied that he had chosen to accept Renee. Chapter 33 Hot. Early the next morning, Colin had just woken up not long ago. Renee served him a steaming breakfast. Looking out the window at the still dim sky, Colin showed a satisfied smile. Then the whole day was spent studying. With Renee cooking, taking care of chores, his own time is once again freed up. I never expected that one day, I would actually live a corrupt life of reaching out for clothes and opening my mouth for food. At noon, Colin briefly introduced the lap school and some forces in the city to Arthur and Renee, so that they could understand their own position and who they could provoke and who they could not. Of course, since he didn't know much about the distribution of forces in the city, he only briefly talked about it once and mentioned the lap school. During this period, Arthur and Renee were in shock throughout the whole process. They never thought that the real overlord of the island was the unheard of rap school far away on the top of the mountain. Colin was not surprised by this. Ordinary civilians and wizards were two completely different classes. Even though wizards in Black Rock City never hide their existence, ordinary civilians' understanding of wizards is still limited. After hearing this, Arthur's attitude towards Colin became more respectful, even to the point of fear. Renee, on the other hand, was a little depressed. Time flew by and it was evening. After Colin had dinner, he took a carriage to the west gate of Black Rock City. After getting off the carriage and telling Arthur to pick him up at dawn tomorrow morning, he asked Arthur to go back. Then he stood alone at the city gate and waited. After a while, when the sun set in the west and there was only the last trace of sunset left on the horizon, Holt finally arrived. "Let's go, I'll take you there," Holt said as he strode out of the city. At this time, other wizards came one after another. This is not surprising. In addition to the lap school, there are also people from the 4 major gangs and 3 families on duty. Holt took him to the far right outside the city. The wooden houses on duty are not fixed. They will be rotated every time. Just remember to move to the right every time. This time we are the 5 wooden houses on the right. Next time we will be the leftmost wooden house. After you get familiar with it, you can come directly here by yourself. There aren't that many rules here, as long as you don't forget to be on duty. Okay, Colin responded. Holter pulled him to the wooden house in the middle. The guard team consists of a small team and a captain of 5 people. The captain usually sits in the wooden house in the middle to facilitate assistance and support. On the first day of duty every month, all members will meet in the wooden house in the middle. They mainly come to me to receive their monthly salary. They should be almost here now, so you can get to know each other. Holt said to Colin as he opened the door. Colin nodded. After joining the City West Guard for so long, he had only met Captain Holt and Minister Barton. "Boss, you are finally here." As soon as he opened the door, an excited and thick male voice came into his ears. Colin looked around and saw that the fat man sitting at the back of the wooden table in the middle of the room was speaking. He stood up as he spoke. Next to him sat a man and a woman. Team leader. The man had a cold face and shouted softly when he saw Holt come in. The woman wears a veil, so her face cannot be seen clearly, and her facial features appear to be gentler. But soon, Colin retracted this evaluation. Orlando, sooner or later you will die from that half-elf bitch. The woman laughed loudly at the fat man who stood up earlier. His voice was rough, but his tone was also very bad. Orlando turned a deaf ear and just came to Holt's side diligently and stretched out his hand. Catherine is right, you have to be moderate, Orlando. Holt was also a little helpless, but he still took out 10 magic stones and handed them to him. Orlando took the magic stone, touched his head and smiled. I know, boss. Holt sighed and said nothing more. Captain, why don't you introduce the new team members? Willard, a cold man, suddenly asked. The masked Catherine also looked over with interest. This is Colin, an intermediate apprentice who just advanced last month. Holt introduced. He's a newcomer. Catherine looked at Colin and asked, can the fireball technique and Hope's defensive force field be instantaneous? Not yet. Colin responded, but Catherine was a little disgusted when she heard this, but then she said casually. You can't deal with ferocious beasts at your level. Stay next to me for a while. Call me sister and I will protect you. The tone is bad, and he is more teasing than caring. Catherine, I didn't expect you to be so good. Sister, you are over 30 and you are old enough to be someone else's mother. Are you embarrassed? Suddenly came Orlando's sarcastic voice. There was a sudden silence in the room. Boom. Immediately afterwards, a huge fireball suddenly shot towards Orlando. Orlando's expression changed drastically, and he quickly put up a translucent blue shield. But he still couldn't resist the fireball, the shield quickly shattered, and he was knocked to the ground. When Colin saw this, his eyelids twitched. Based on the power of this fireball, it is estimated that 2 shots can break through his steel armor. Old woman, what's wrong with you? Orlando stood up in embarrassment, furious. Looking carefully, he seemed to have no other injuries except for some burn marks on his clothes. Enough. Holt quickly stopped and raised his hand to extinguish the spreading flames. Immediately afterwards, another green light shone out, and the charred and damaged areas on the wall of the wooden house began to sprout and grow, and finally the hole slowly healed. But Catherine still couldn't help but feel angry, and a surge of magic was brewing. I've said enough. Upon seeing this, Holt uttered a few words coldly again. As the words fell, a shuddering aura suddenly descended into the room. In a daze, Colin seemed to see a huge, intertwined black ancient tree swaying in the shadow behind Holt. I'm sorry, boss. Orlando apologized hastily. I'm sorry, Captain. Catherine's face turned pale and she whispered softly. Although Holt is gentle and doesn't care about the way they speak on weekdays, they will still be frightened if they are angry. The shuddering aura suddenly dissipated, and Colin breathed a sigh of relief. He looked up and saw Willard on the other side exhaling slightly. The two of them looked at each other, feeling a bit of sympathy for each other. At this time, Holt regained his gentleness and gave Catherine and Willard the magic stone. Then he urged them to quickly go to their cabins for duty. Before they went out, he specifically asked Colin to live in the wooden house on his left as a way of taking care of him. Although he had a certain understanding of Colin's strength and knew that he was far stronger than a newly advanced intermediate apprentice. But no matter what, in his eyes, Colin has only advanced for a month. Even if he is strong, he is probably only limited, and the diversity of his methods cannot be compared with that of a senior intermediate apprentice. Chapter 34 Unexpected Disaster. After walking out of the wooden house, Orlando snorted coldly and pulled Willard towards the right. Colin was forced to walk to the left with Catherine. The two walked one behind the other. Kid, don't think anything of me. Catherine said abruptly. She glanced back at Colin and said coldly. Orlando's head is full of crap, and I don't want you to be too. Colin's expression remained unchanged, but he was very stunned in his heart. He didn't know how to answer for a moment. Seeing Colin's calm expression, Catherine frowned and said in a deep voice. Sometimes, a real man is the one who dares to admit his own thoughts. I really have no idea about you. Colin slowly stopped and said solemnly. His face was calm and his tone was sincere and sincere. Catherine sneered and continued walking forward. Looks disdainful. Colin frowned and chose to wait a few more minutes, until Catherine's figure had turned into a small dot, and then slowly took a step forward. What a disaster. He sighed inwardly. He had not expected Catherine to have such a bad character. Fortunately, the wooden houses on duty are about 500 meters away from each other, so some embarrassment can be avoided to some extent. Entering the wooden house, Colin took out the bright crystal, lit it, and placed it on the wooden lamp stand on the wall next to it. With the soft white light, he looked around the room. The layout of this place is the same as the previous cabin where Captain Holt lived. It is a large single room with a toilet. There is a set of tables and chairs on the left side of the front half of the door. There is a tatami-like soft mat placed on the floor in the middle of the room. It looks quite clean, it must have been recently replaced. But Colin still gave it a cleansing blow before slowly sitting down. Tuck tuck tuck. As soon as Colin sat down, there was a knock on the door. Could a ferocious beast attack so soon? Single quote. He frowned and quickly stood up and opened the door. Grown-ups. As soon as the door opened, he saw a sturdy city guard captain wearing fine steel armor, taking off his helmet and putting it on his left hand, and then greeted him respectfully and caressed his chest. Behind him were several city guards wearing plate armor who also took off their helmets to pay tribute. Is there a ferocious beast coming? Colin asked. Why not launch a signal flare? No, sir, we came here specifically to see you. The captain of the city guard quickly explained, and then added. You have just come on duty. You may not know that the area our team is responsible for is your area. Without waiting for Colin to answer, he waved back, took a huge gray cloth bag from the hands of the team members, and handed it to Colin. These are some of our thoughts. Please accept them. The guard captain held the cloth bag in his hands, and he looked at Colin nervously. For these patrolling city guards, it is particularly important to have a good relationship with the wizards on duty. When a vicious beast attacks, perhaps as long as the wizard on duty pays more attention, sees the flare in time, and arrives 10 seconds and a half earlier, they can save one life. Colin hesitated for a moment and reached out to take it. He has gradually become accustomed to the rules of this world. Sir, please take good care of me in the future, then we won't disturb you anymore. Seeing Colin take it, the guard captain breathed a sigh of relief and then said goodbye. Colin nodded calmly and watched them file away with torches and start patrolling. The city guards are a force other than the 4 major gangs and the 3 major families, and belong directly to the city lord Price Bennett. Price is an old peak wizard apprentice, probably in his 90s. His body is weak and there is no hope of advancement. The only wish now is to let his blood spread. The school is aloof and never looks down on other forces, and is unwilling to waste its energy in Blackstone City. So I hit it off with Price. Price manages all the trivial matters in Black Rock City for the school. In addition to dispatching guards, the school helps deal with the problems of polluters, cults, and ferocious beasts. You just need to wait for the resources to be collected every month. While thinking about it, Colin stepped to the window and looked at the top of the mountain in the distance, which was the location of the rap school. In the school, most of the wizards stay in the wizarding territory. They enjoy the provision of the entire city without having to worry about trivial matters. Except for necessary tasks, just focus on climbing forward. Single quote. But the guards can only stay in this place. Single quote. He breathed out the golden paper. The progress of the intermediate apprentice above is stuck at 2/100ths. Come to think of it, the progress of my wizard training is so slow. In addition to the reason that it is more difficult to improve after advancement, it is also because the magic energy in Black Rock City is far less rich than that of the wizard. He sighed slightly in his heart, walked to the cushion in the middle of the room, and sat down cross-legged. On patrol. The team members chatted in low voices. Do you think the new wizard is reliable? He doesn't look older than me. Yeah, what a bad luck. It's been so long since a new wizard arrived, how come we just happened to meet him? I just hope there won't be any vicious beasts attacking us this month. Well, the worse the strength, the better the character. He looked so gentle when giving gifts, so I guess his strength. Shut up. The guard captain scolded in a deep voice, don't discuss wizards behind your back. The team members were silent. The guard captain paused and then said, I have been more cautious in the past month. The beast is coming, so run faster. Then he added casually, run to the nearest wooden house first. I remember that the veiled witch is on the left. Yes, Captain. The team members immediately understood. Most of them were from the lower levels of the city. Although they had chosen to be city guards, they were already prepared to face danger. But being from a lower class background also means that they are likely to be the breadwinners of the family, which forces them to cherish their lives. The guard captain continued to lead the patrol with a torch, his face calm, but his heart was a little uneasy. The worries of the team members are also his worries. It's been a long time since such a young wizard came to the west of the city. In the past, when new wizards came, they wouldn't be so worried because the beasts were not strong. But in recent years, the ferocious beasts have become stronger and stronger. Not long ago, a wizard was lost here. If the new wizard from the lap school is weak, it will not have any impact on him. Because when he is in danger, the wizards next to him will help him, so it is difficult to lose his life. But it's completely different for them. Although he hinted that the team members should be smarter and run to the stronger wizard in the distance. But in fact, the lives of everyone in their team are bound to the corresponding wizards on duty. If the wizard dies, they will eventually die as well. Time flies. That night, the weather was calm, there were no vicious beast attacks, only the sound of city guards patrolling from time to time. Colin looked at the clock on the shelf on the wall, stood up slowly, packed his things and prepared to go home. As Holt said, the guard's job on duty doesn't have many rules. When the time comes, just leave when the time comes. There is no need to report to anyone and there are no performance reviews. Punishment will only occur when the beast is handled improperly, such as when the beast is absent from work and the beast attacks, causing losses. Picking up the gray cloth bag given to him by the city guard last night on the wooden table, Colin opened the door and walked out. The cloth bag contained a large piece of fresh meat. If I guessed correctly, it should be the meat of a ferocious beast. But Colin really couldn't identify what kind of animal it was. However, no matter what kind of ferocious animal meat is, it is a good thing, and ordinary people can strengthen their health by eating it regularly. Of course, its biggest benefit is that it can assist knights in their training. The reason why the city guards are all knights and the captains are all great knights is because they rely on the meat of ferocious beasts. In addition, the meat of ferocious beasts is also an invisible benefit for the city west guards. The ferocious beasts killed by the wizards will all be purchased by the city guards. If you encounter a lot of ferocious beasts in a month, you can also increase your income by a few magic stones. When he walked out of the wooden house, Colin happened to meet the wizard who came to change shifts and was also a member of the lap school. The two said hello in a friendly way. In fact, Colin had seen him from a distance when he came to the cabin last night, but maybe because he was delayed for some time in Holt's cabin, the two did not meet head-on. The fields to the west of the city account for more than 80% of the entire Black Rock City's food output. If something goes wrong, the consequences will be disastrous. So basically, there are wizards guarding here at all times. Subscribe to Chinese Novel Audiobook YouTube channel. Chapter 35 Fierce Beast. The days that followed were peaceful and fulfilling. Every evening, Colin took a carriage to go on duty, and returned by carriage early the next morning. Thanks to the abundant energy brought by the solar breathing method and Renee's hard work and ability, the time he spends on spiritual practice every day has not decreased but increased. On the third night, Colin is practicing in the wooden house. Bang! The characteristic sound of the flare came from afar. Colin quickly pushed open the door and looked in the direction of the flare. That's far to the left. Soon after the signal flare was lit, there were faint roars and sounds of fighting. Immediately afterwards, the light of witchcraft also came from the fighting area. If the estimate is correct, it should be beyond Catherine's area. According to Holt, it should be the area that the Shi Yuan gang is responsible for. As the wizards began to join the battle, the wailing sounds of wild beasts gradually began to be heard. Colin suppressed his desire to go over and check and return to the house. Regarding the ferocious beasts, although Holt introduced him to a lot of knowledge, after all, he had never actually seen it, and after all, it was just talk on paper. If he could watch the battle between the ferocious beast and the wizard, it would be of great benefit to him in dealing with the ferocious beast alone in the future. Unfortunately, it is not a wise choice to rush to the area where other wizards are responsible in the dark night. He continued to practice again. But the howling of ferocious beasts and the sound of fighting with wizards in my ears did not stop for a long time. Even getting closer, Colin couldn't help but push the door open again and went out. His mind changed and he jumped to the roof. He looked to his left. The wizard in the distance released a light spell, and with Colin's eyesight, he could clearly see a thin figure wearing a witch robe chasing a huge ferocious beast. The thin figure was followed by several city guards holding torches. Taking another closer look, Colin finally saw the figure of the ferocious beast clearly. Thick black mane, nostrils pointed upward, two curved tusks protruding diagonally from both sides of the long mouth. This was clearly an enlarged version of a wild boar. Colin was a little shocked and confused. This wild boar is probably almost as big as an elephant in the previous life, it's not as big as Holt described it before. Single quote. He used a golden cleaning technique on the roof beneath him and slowly sat down facing the distance. Although the ferocious wild boar beast is large, it still has little resistance to the wizard's power. All he could do was howl and run away in embarrassment. If it weren't for its strong vitality and the fact that the thin wizard didn't seem to have learned any displacement witchcraft, the ferocious wild boar would have died at the hands of the wizard. But now it seems that the thin wizard is still much slower than the wild boar and the ferocious beast, and he really won't be able to catch up for a while. But no matter what, the ferocious beast will be defeated sooner or later. It just increases your knowledge. Single quote. Colin moved his butt, adjusted the angle, and admired the pursuit battle in front of him. But not long after, his expression became strange. The vitality of the wild boar beast was simply terrifying. He saw that the thin wizard behind him fired several energy missiles, which had already caused many huge wounds on the wild boar beast's back. But the ferocious wild boar seemed to be running faster, showing no signs of slowing down. He was about to run into the area that Catherine was responsible for. At this moment, the thin wizard behind him slowed down slightly and muttered something. 2 seconds later, a huge light blue missile shot towards the ferocious wild boar beast ahead. Bang! This enhanced version of the missile directly shattered the butt of the wild boar beast. The ferocious wild boar fell to the ground, its huge body making a dull collision sound with the ground. The thin wizard also breathed a sigh of relief, slowed down, and waited for the city guards behind him to arrive to clean up the mess. On the roof, Colin also stood up. After watching the play, it's time to go back and continue practicing. If the ferocious beast he faced was only of this level of strength, then he had nothing to worry about. Suddenly, a strange sound came. It sounded like maggots multiplying wildly on rotting flesh. Colin frowned and looked around. The next second, his pupils shrank slightly. The wild boar beast that had fallen down slowly got up. With his strong eyesight, Colin could still vaguely see that the pieces of meat on the wild boar's originally ragged buttocks were healing with an incredible wriggling motion. The boar continued its run and soon ran into Catherine's territory next door. The thin wizard hesitated for a moment, but finally continued to chase. This time, the ferocious beast's vitality was beyond his imagination, but it was probably at the end of its strength. The wild boar ran away quickly and soon crossed most of the area under Catherine's responsibility. Colin's expression changed. After running for a while, the wild boar was almost reaching the area he was responsible for. He bent his legs slightly, jumped off the roof, and while blessing himself with steel armor and hope defensive force field, he ran in the direction of the wild boar. As a great knight, he can move much faster than the skinny wizard. In just a moment, he came to the junction of his area and Catherine's area. And the wild boar beast in front of him was not far away from him. Colin braced himself for battle. But the wild boar seemed to be just returning to its glory before, and it looked in extremely bad condition at this time. His originally bright red eyes had become dim, he was breathing heavily, and blood was dripping from the wound on his back in large streams. Another missile shot from behind the wild boar. With a bang, the wild boar fell to the ground again, and its huge body slid forward a certain distance under the action of inertia. Finally, he fell down about 50 meters away from Colin. A shrill whine came from its mouth, and then gradually became fainter. The thin wizard also caught up at this time, and he stabbed the ferocious wild boar again, killing it completely. Then, he raised his head and glanced at Colin, giving him a slight greeting. Colin nodded in response, turned and left. The carcass of this ferocious wild boar beast is estimated to be sold by the city guards for at least 5 magic stones, he thought to himself. An inexplicable heat wave came from behind Su. Colin's hair stood up and he turned his head to look behind. Boom! A fireball exploded on the wild boar carcass. Under the control of the caster, the scorching flames only burned a circle on the black-haired wild boar, only burning away the black hair before quietly dissipating. What do you mean, Your Excellency? The thin wizard looked to the left, his face a little gloomy. Colin followed his gaze and turned his head. A veiled wizard was slowly walking towards here with a group of city guards. That was Catherine. I'm dealing with an incoming ferocious beast. Don't you have eyes? Catherine responded calmly, then turned around and ordered the city guards around her to come forward and process the beast's meat. I killed this beast, the thin man said coldly, unable to hide his anger. Where is this? Is this the area you are responsible for? This ferocious beast was obviously killed by me in the area I am responsible for. Are you trying to steal the trophies of the rap school? Catherine retorted. Seeing that the situation was not good, Colin quietly retreated back. What's more, you said you killed the one you killed. Can anyone testify? Quote. Do you have one? The thin wizard asked angrily, loudly. Catherine chuckled and replied unhurriedly. Of course I do. You think so, Colin? She slowly turned her head and stared at Colin quietly. The thin wizard also turned his head. The two looked at Colin together. Chapter 36 Ridiculous. Colin stopped and looked ugly. Catherine's arrogant look really refreshed his understanding of the members of the school. And he just came here to watch the fun, why drag him into the water? He finally understood today what disaster meant for Caillou. Colin, he is also a member of the rap school. Tell him, who killed this beast? Catherine asked again. The thin wizard was expecting Colin's answer at first. But the next second, when he saw Colin wearing the same triangular badge as Catherine, his expression changed. He almost forgot that people from the lap school were on duty in this area this month. The anger in his heart gradually subsided. He looked at Catherine and Colin and backed down. Although the male wizard standing next to him seemed not to care about this matter, what if it happened? The lap school has always acted in a domineering manner, and they are the only ones who suffer from other forces. Your Excellency is right. Since this ferocious beast died here, it belongs to you, so I won't bother you. After all, we are all wizards on duty, and we can also be called colleagues. There is no need to hurt the harmony. The thin wizard raised the corners of his mouth, pretending to be gentle, and then slowly backed away. Boom. But what greeted him was the same fireball. Although the defensive magic he quickly counterattacked withstood the burning damage, the shock wave knocked him high into the air and fell heavily to the ground. Go away. Catherine snorted coldly. The thin wizard suppressed the dizziness in his head, got up, and quickly left away without saying a word. In terms of identity, he is just a deacon of the Chi gang. In terms of strength, he is far inferior to her. Even if the male wizard next to him doesn't intervene, he has no chance of winning. If you stay any longer, you will only be humiliating yourself. Even though he said this, the anger in his heart did not get any comfort, but became more intense. He has obviously given in and given up. Rap school. Veiled bitch. The steps under his feet became harder and harder, trampling the crops in the ground in a ventive manner. And the other side. The fair words Colin was about to say on behalf of the thin wizard were caught off guard and stuck in his throat. He looked at the thin wizard figure who left in embarrassment, and the sense of justice he felt in his heart was suddenly shattered. He just felt ridiculous. You just swallowed your anger and left. Single quote. Colin stood there, feeling inexplicably upset. Pack up quickly. Catherine on the side was urging the city guards who were decomposing the beast's corpse, with an arrogant look on her face. As for Colin standing next to her, she seemed to have ignored him. Colin stood there for a while, watching the thin wizard gradually move away, and finally disappeared into the darkness. After the ferocious beast in front of him had been almost decomposed, he slowly turned around and returned to the wooden house where he was on duty. The next day, the sky was dim. Colin walked out of the cabin, ending another day of duty. Although the solar breathing method brought him a lot of energy, he was still a little sleepy after not sleeping all night. He was somewhat looking forward to returning home later. Renee must have carefully prepared breakfast for him. I don't know what to eat this morning. After eating, lie down in a warm bed and sleep comfortably. Life can be considered nourishing. But after walking a few steps, a faint noisy sound in the distance attracted his attention. Because the wooden house where Catherine was on duty was on his left, and the city gate was further to the left. So every time he returned to the city, he would pass through the area that Catherine was responsible for. Those noisy sounds came from the fields in which Catherine was responsible. Colin looked over. What came into view was an endless field, but at this time there were some signs of damage on it. I didn't notice it last night, but now it seems like the damage to the fields is quite large during the day. The ferocious wild boar beast was like a bulldozer rampaging through the fields, plowing the crops over and splashing soil, forming a long ravine. Especially the place where the black-haired wild boar fell is a big pit. But the large pit dug out by the carcass of the black-haired wild boar was far less shocking than the other charred round pit next to it. The charred circular pit over there was at least twice as big as the big pit pressed by the wild boar carcass. It radiated outward from the middle, and the wheat seedlings in the innermost part had turned into black ashes. It should be that Catherine failed to extinguish the fire in time after attacking the thin wizard with a fireball last night. Colin speculated. Otherwise, how could a fireball spell create such a large black pit? At this time, there was a circle of skinny farmers surrounding the big pit made by the wild boar. Behind them were several city guards, and the noisy sound came from there. Snapped, snapped. From time to time, the sound of city guards waving their whips in the air could be heard. Colin stopped and looked at it for a while. The city guards were urging and directing them to lift up the overwhelmed crops and plant them again. But it seems that the effect is not good. Only a few crops can be saved, and most of the crops cannot be saved. The wheat seems to be not far from ripening, at least the wheat seeds on the ears look close to ripening. The skinny farmers picked up the scattered wheat ears on the ground while holding on to the wheat stalks, and put them into the bamboo baskets beside them. Colin thought of Captain Holt inexplicably. If he were present, he might be able to save the wheat. It's a pity. In this world, wizards are so high up, who will do these little things? Whether more or less food is produced every year will only affect ordinary people. Even if there is no harvest on the island this year, the wizards will not be hungry. They have many other ways to obtain food. In previous lives, the people at the bottom of the war-torn countries suffered from severe famine, but the rich lived a life of wine and meat. Such an unequal reality is even more true in this world. If it weren't for the necessity of ordinary people's existence, wizards would not care about their life and death, let alone guard the fields. Colin shook his head and continued walking towards the city. After a while, his familiar black carriage appeared in front of him. This time Arthur was not the only one standing next to the car. Master. Renee greeted him. Why are you here? Don't you need to take care of Demi? Colin asked in surprise. Demi can take care of herself by herself. I'll bring you breakfast, Master. Renee smiled slightly, raised the basket food box in her hand and showed it to Colin. Colin was a little surprised. The west part of the city was quite far away from where he lived, and it would take almost half an hour to get there by carriage. So after every shift, he would indeed feel a little hungry while sitting in the car after not eating anything all night. In the past few days, he had only eaten when he got home. He really didn't expect that Renee could bring him food directly. He couldn't help but feel a little surprised and praised Renee a few times. Renee brought him food, which meant he could eat breakfast in the carriage and go straight to bed when he got home. This can save a lot of time. The two of them got into the carriage together. Arthur didn't say a word the whole time, but bowed respectfully to greet Colin when he saw him. He is a qualified groom. Colin was also very satisfied with him. By the way, Arthur, have you done what I asked you to do? Before stepping on the carriage, he suddenly remembered something and asked Arthur. It's ready, Master, Arthur replied. Colin nodded with satisfaction. It seems that Arthur's efficiency is okay. What he asked Arthur to make was actually a wooden target. If you want to be proficient in using witchcraft, you can't just talk about it on paper. Chapter 37 Black-maned Giant Boar. Laugh. There was a faint sound of breaking through the air, followed by a loud crash. Boom. There was also a sharp sound of metal bending. The metal arrow shot through the thick iron plate on the chest of the human-shaped wooden target, and the remaining kinetic energy caused it to fall straight back, making a bang sound when it came into contact with the flat floor of the basement. Colin stepped forward to take a closer look. The wooden target is close to the size of a human being, and its lower body is a huge weighted iron block. And there is an iron plate that is thick enough to be called a block hanging on his chest. The iron plate was about 10 centimeters thick and had been completely penetrated by the metal arrow. A satisfied expression appeared on Colin's face. This was the first time he used all his strength to use a limit-breaking arrow shooting technique against a real object. When he killed the rogue North before, he only used 1/10 of his strength, which was far from reaching his full strength. Now it seems that the power of the arrow technique after breaking the limit once has exceeded his imagination. At least the steel armor witchcraft before breaking the limit is absolutely indefensible. If it were replaced by the steel armor that was broken once now, it might only be a 50-50 split. But the metal arrows seem a little inappropriate. Single quote. Colin slowly drew out the arrow and thought to himself. Now that the limit of archery has been broken, the shortcomings of insufficient power have been made up, but arrows are still needed. But ordinary arrows are not convenient to carry. Maybe it's time to change to an arrow that is easier to carry. After breaking through the limit once, his understanding of arrow archery became deeper and deeper, and he had long understood that it was not limited to shooting arrows. As long as it is made of suitable metal, after certain adjustments, it can be launched through the arrow technique. As soon as he thought of it, Colin walked upstairs and asked Arthur to go to the blacksmith shop for him to make some different model samples to test the effect. After receiving the order, Arthur drove out immediately. These days, chores like this have been left to him. On the other side, Renee was preparing dinner, and little Demi was playing in the yard alone. This yard should have been a specially maintained garden, but now it is overgrown with weeds, and there is a huge coconut tree on the left. After moving in, they simply removed the grass once and did not take care of it carefully. Instead, these leftover flowers and weeds became a playground for little Demi to play. She wasn't afraid of Colin, she just played around with a small wooden stick by herself. Colin waved, called her over and pinched his face. Demi is 5 years old this year. She has a very lovable appearance and personality. In her previous life, she must have been a child who received red envelopes from relatives during the new year. At the beginning, Colin was worried that it would not be safe for her to play alone. For example, the coconut tree on the left often drops coconuts, and she is worried that they may accidentally hit her. But the children in this world are far less delicate than the children in the previous life, and they also know how to avoid many dangers. Later, he got used to her being a 5-year-old child playing around by herself. After all, even her sister Renee wasn't worried. After playing with Demi for a while, Colin was almost rested and returned to the basement to practice witchcraft. After all, he is not some non-human being with a monster's strong will. Except for the gold paper, he is just an ordinary person, and it is difficult for him to practice repeatedly every day like a machine. Not doing anything else, no socializing and no fun. So he would occasionally chat with Renee and squeeze Demi's fleshy little face. As for Arthur, he was a boring gourd and could not let go in front of him, so he rarely chatted with him. It's the second day since the new arrow model was built. Last night on duty, another ferocious wild boar that looked exactly the same came to attack. But it accidentally bumped into Captain Holt's territory, and was strangled to death by vines before walking a few meters. In order to distinguish it, this ferocious beast was named the black-maned giant pig by Holt last night. The special feature is its unusual size. The dark forest is an extremely dangerous place, and perhaps only the Lap wizard on the entire island has the confidence to travel back and forth in it safely. I don't know where these ferocious beasts come from in the dark forest. The only thing that is certain is that the beast is getting stronger and stronger. Colin has heard people sigh like this more than once. After he came back from his shift and woke up, Arthur brought him several different samples of new arrow models. There are the simplest steel balls, as well as fusiform, diamond-shaped and so on. Colin went to the basement to test without stopping. Streams of light shot out from his hands quickly, hitting the iron plate in front of the wooden target full of holes. Ultimately, after careful testing, Colin settled on the fusiform shape. This form is faster and more powerful. The custom-made fusiform arrows are also only knuckle-sized, making them easy to carry. The only disadvantage is that it is more difficult to make than other types, so the price is more expensive. But it was also within the range that Colin could bear. After that, there were giant black-maned pigs attacking me while on duty for several days. And every time it was either on the territory of the Chiwan gang next door or on the territory of their Lap school. Although it was eventually killed by the wizard every time, it relied on its strong vitality and huge size to cause huge losses in the fields every time. After finishing his shift, Colin often saw many skinny farmers saving wheat, and the expressions on their faces became increasingly ugly. Once he even saw a dark, thin old farmer lying on the ground picking up wheat ears while shedding tears. This situation continued until the 11th day of his shift. After his shift that morning, as he was preparing to return, Holt stopped him and other team members. It's rare for the team members to get together again. Holt led them to the open space outside the city gate, where a middle-aged man with black curly hair was standing. Lord Price. Holt greeted him. Colin and others also followed suit and said hello respectfully. In terms of status, City Lord Price is at least on par with the 3 top apprentices in the school, and maybe slightly better in terms of strength. It obviously needs to be treated respectfully. Price responded kindly. Colin raised his head and glanced at Price. This was the first time he saw the legendary Lord of Blackstone City. He looks like an ordinary middle-aged man, but his face is a bit old. After a while, 5 more wizards from the Yuan gang rushed over. Colin spotted the familiar figure of the thin wizard among them. It was obvious that he also saw Catherine. His expression changed slightly, and he slightly hid his body behind his companion next to him. Catherine had not noticed him, or had forgotten him. Everyone is here, I'll keep the story short. At this time, Price said in a deep voice. In recent days, the black-maned giant pig has repeatedly attacked the fields and caused huge damage. If this continues, a large number of people will die in the city this year. A herd of wild boars should have appeared in the dark forest. They cannot be allowed to continue to reproduce. So I call on you to take the initiative, and the time is tonight. The team will be led by the most powerful wizard Holt. Mallory, do you have any objection? Quote. No, City Lord. The wizard headed by the Yuan gang replied. He is the first-class apprentice of the Yuan gang. Very good. I will personally give out 150 magic stones as a reward. If I can transport the giant black bristle pig, I will buy it at the normal price. Price nodded, then glanced around and said slowly. Okay, that's all I have to say. Holt will be responsible for the specific arrangements. After saying that, he turned around and boarded the luxurious carriage behind him, and drove away. Next, Holt briefly talked about tactics. In fact, it is to drive the wild boar away, causing it to panic and escape back to the dark forest, and then take this opportunity to track it to its lair and kill all the wild boars in one pot. Of course, in view of the danger of the dark forest, if it goes too deep, the operation will be abandoned directly. Chapter 38 Take the initiative. The next evening, in the wooden house on duty. One after another, new spindle-shaped arrows, or darts, were thrown into the soft animal skin bag placed on the table by Colin, making a tinkling sound when they collided with each other. After it was half full, Colin tied it around his waist and stored it close to his body. This wasn't the only place on his body where he kept a spindle dart. In order to prevent him from falling into the embarrassing situation of having no darts available, he stored more or less fusiform darts in multiple places on his body. In addition, he also carried some dry food made by Renee with him, just in case. Everything was ready, and he waited quietly in the house. According to common sense, there should also be a black-maned giant pig attacking tonight. What he needed to do was wait until the patrolling city guards noticed the movement, sound the signal flare, and then rush over quickly. Before that, Holt will work with Mallory, the first-class apprentice of the Yuan gang, to plant a mark on the wild boar before they come. Then wait for them to join together at the same place, and then follow the marks together to catch up. The moonlight outside the window is bright and clear, and the silver moonlight shines into the window, quietly dissolving into the soft white light of the bright crystal. It's a nice day tonight, with the moon and stars scarcely visible, and you can see clearly everything in the fields without even needing a torch. I sat in the room and waited for a long time, but the signal flare never came. Colin kept thinking about it, but he was a little unable to calm down and practice. I still haven't experienced a real battle. He chuckled in his heart, but he didn't think it was anything. Before an exam, an interview, playing a boss in a game, or even before setting off for a trip, people will inevitably have their hearts beat faster. This feeling is mixed with excitement, nervousness, anticipation, fear, etc. It is difficult to summarize simply and is also human nature. Colin pushed the door open and went out, facing the wooden house, slightly bending his legs, and then jumped up. The terrain outside the city is flat, which is not only conducive to farming, but also means that the view is not easily blocked. He stood on the roof and had a panoramic view of everything around him. Groups of city guards holding torches patrolled the fields regularly, drawing orange tracks in the dark night. The cool breeze blew by, and his heart gradually calmed down again. After performing a golden cleansing blow on the roof below him as usual, he sat down cross-legged and began to practice meditation. Time keeps passing. Tap 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 tap. The footsteps of the city guards came from far to near, and then from near to far. Patrolling back and forth. I do not know how long it has been. Bah! Boom! An orange signal flare suddenly exploded in the night sky, which was extremely eye-catching. In an instant, Colin's fair face was covered with a layer of faint orange light. Before his mind could react, his body had already jumped from the cabin. But before his toes touched the ground, he heard a swish sound coming from the wooden house on the right. Looking up, he saw a figure rising into the sky and quickly rushing towards the direction from which the signal flare was launched. It was Holt. Looking further to the left, there is also a wizard flying quickly in the night sky there. It should be Mallory from the Chiwan gang. Colin exhaled slightly, feeling that the blood in his body was inexplicably agitated. He no longer hesitated and hurried along the field ridge. The wind whistled by my ears, and my strong and powerful feet stepped accurately on the narrow dirt road in the fields. After a while, he saw a little fire coming from ahead. After a while, the unique neighing of the giant black bristle pig also entered the ears through the air. But as he got closer, the neighing of the giant black-maned pig became farther and farther away. When he reached the firelight, all he could see was a small group of city guards holding torches, and the two wizards Holt and Mallory standing there waiting for them. Perhaps it was because the area where the giant black-maned pig attacked happened to be the area he was responsible for, so he was the first to arrive besides Holt and Mallory. After Colin greeted them respectfully, he stood aside and waited. Large tracts of wheat fell in the field in front of them, forming a clearly visible trace leading to the dark forest. It seems that Holt and the others have marked the giant black-maned boar and driven it back to the dark forest, he speculated secretly. Ta ta ta. With the sound of approaching footsteps, more and more wizards gathered around him. He didn't wait long before everyone arrived. Holt looked around, counted the number of people, and gave a crisp order. Set off. He immediately moved forward, while Mallory came to the back of the line. After a while, they followed the trail to the edge of the dark forest. After entering the forest, shrink your formation, pay attention to the people around you, and don't fall behind. Before entering the forest, Holt stopped and turned around to remind him in a deep voice. Colin was walking behind him, with Catherine and other team members beside him. After Holt reminded him, he used the light technique to summon a light ball to float in front of him, and then took the lead into the forest. Colin followed. As soon as he stepped into the dark forest, he obviously felt completely different from the outside world. The dark forest was extremely quiet and had an inexplicable eerie feeling. With the soft white light of the light ball, Colin looked around. There are trees of various shapes growing all around, some with tangled and crooked roots, some with deep roots and leafy leaves, tall and straight. But they all have one characteristic in common. That is the bark and leaves that are so dark that they are almost black. This color makes them look like pure black shadows. If you stare at them for a long time, you will even have the illusion of twisting and swaying. Hall led everyone forward firmly and unhurriedly, adjusting the direction slightly from time to time. Along the way, Colin also saw many traces of the activity of the giant black-maned pig. The group also encountered attacks from some snakes and insects, but they were all dealt with in advance by Holt or Mallory. After a while, Holt's pace suddenly accelerated, and he didn't adjust his direction anymore, and moved straight and quickly in the fixed direction. It should be that the giant black-maned pig returned to its lair and then stopped moving. Colin speculated in his mind. After moving forward quickly for a while, everyone came to a mountain call. Directly in front of them was a huge, dark cave. Stop. Holt waved his hand back, a cautious look on his face. Entering the cave rashly is obviously not a wise choice. He thought for a while and called Mallory. I have a way to find out what's going on inside the cave, but I may need your help. Mallory nodded, motioning for him to continue. Holt took out a handful of rice-sized seeds from his arms and said, "This is the seed of mayweed. After it grows, it can roughly sense the life strength of the creatures around you. I need your help to blow it evenly into the cave." No problem. Mallory nodded. He stretched out his hand to catch the brown seeds and threw them into the air. The brown seeds were lifted up by a gentle breeze and flew quietly into the cave. After a while, Mallory nodded and said, "That's it." Holt nodded slightly and began to perform the technique. In the cave, those maygrass seeds scattered on the ground quietly sprouted, and the fragile seed coat was gradually torn. The germ popped out and quickly grew into a maygrass plant about 10 centimeters long, with the thin hairs on it swaying in the wind. Outside the cave, Holt closed his eyes and felt carefully. After a moment, he opened his eyes, a smile appeared on his face, and he said lightly, "Let's go. There are only dozens of ordinary ferocious beasts inside. They should all be giant black-maned pigs. This should be their nest." Chapter 39 Desperate Situation. A group of people walked into the cave. Colin only felt that the huge dark hole was like a terrifying big mouth, slowly devouring them. But this was just an illusion. The next second, the wizards used light spells one after another, and the soft white light illuminated the cave as if it were daytime. They walked quickly towards the depths of the cave, and soon came to a wide hall, where a group of black-maned wild boars were sleeping together. Holt glanced around, and when he determined that the only exit here was the cave entrance from which they came, he gave the order. Free to kill. He was the first to perform the technique, and several knotted vines suddenly appeared among the wild boars. They seemed to be slow, but in fact they quickly bound and entangled the nearby black-maned giant boar. Yi! Yi! The entangled giant black bristle pig screamed in pain, and its sleeping companions nearby were also woken up. Mallory on the side was not to be outdone. With a wave of his hand, a light blue wind blade shot out. Each shot could accurately take away the life of a giant pig. Most of the intermediate apprentices on the side worked much harder, and it often took a while to completely kill a giant black-maned pig. However, Willard and Catherine, who were also members of the team, surprised Colin. They slaughtered the giant black-maned boar more efficiently than the other apprentices. The acid splash used by Willard was a very ordinary witchcraft, but it was very powerful in his hands. The black-maned giant pig that was hit by the attack soon had its brain corroded by the acid and died. Although Catherine is arrogant, it must be said that her fireball technique is indeed superb. She did not choose to shoot the black-maned wild boar directly with fireball, but let the fireball continue to cover the black-maned giant boar's face. Often not long after, accompanied by the aroma of roasted pig brains, a giant black-maned pig suddenly fell to the ground and lost its life. This operation seems easy, but in fact it is not simple. Just hitting the head accurately is very difficult, not to mention the explosive fireball technique that continues to burn on the boar's head like gangrene attached to the bone. Colin looked away and took out the custom-made spear. Buzz. In silence, a huge hole opened from the neck of an adult black-maned giant pig at the edge of the cave hall, running from front to back. But even with such a serious injury, the giant black bristle pig was still alive and kicking, and the wound was healing quickly. The shot missed. Colin shook his head, took out another spear, and shot it. Whoosh. Boom. This time it was a perfect headshot. The giant pig fell down at the sound. 5 magic stones are in hand. A smile appeared on his face. In terms of killing efficiency alone, as long as he shoots more accurately, maybe even Catherine can't compare to him. As for the magic stone, the black-maned giant boar's lair is not far from the edge of the dark forest. At present, it seems that there is a high probability that it can be transported out. If you can transport it out, you can exchange it for magic stones. As for the ownership of the corpses of different black-maned giant pigs, it is obviously whoever kills them. Although 5 magic stones are not much, the reward in exchange for killing a few more is still considerable. Single quote. Colin thought this, and soon he took out another spear and selected the suitable black-maned giant boar. Because the scene is great, and the giant black-maned boar can be exchanged for magic stones. Therefore, in order to avoid misunderstandings, the same giant black-maned pig will usually not be focused on, and everyone will tacitly focus on solving the one they selected. What do you mean? That giant pig is going to be killed by me soon. At this moment, there was an angry shout from the side. Colin glanced at it and saw that it was an intermediate apprentice from the Chiwan gang who was questioning Catherine. Catherine ignored him and continued to slaughter the wild boar without looking back. The 2 Holts not far away didn't pay much attention to this place. The intermediate apprentice finally suppressed his anger and changed to a giant pig to continue the attack. At this time, Catherine was summoning several fireballs and shooting them accurately towards the middle of the hall. There were a group of giant pig babies there that were obviously smaller than the other black-maned giant pigs. Colin shook his head. Just as he felt that everyone was restrained and understanding, Catherine overturned his idea. Whoosh. A spear was shot out by him again. Colin stopped thinking about it and focused on killing the giant pig, taking this rare opportunity to practice the accuracy of his arrow shooting. Under the constant attacks from everyone, the giant black bristle pig is just a turtle in an urn, and its number continues to decrease. Especially after Catherine killed most of the piglets in the middle, the remaining giant pigs rushed towards them crazily. Unfortunately, it was all in vain, but it made their output more comfortable. Roar. Just when Colin was obsessed with shooting, a violent roar suddenly came from the passage behind him. He froze, silently and quickly approached Holt, then turned and looked back. A giant pig with black manes that was obviously different from others of its kind was charging toward them. Its overall appearance is not much different from the ordinary black-maned giant pig, except that its fur is darker. But its size is at least twice the size of an ordinary giant pig. It is visually estimated to be at least 2 or 3 stories high, and its back almost touches the top of the cave. Not to mention its strength, its size gives people a strong sense of oppression. Perhaps it should be called the black-maned giant pig king. At this time, Holt and Mallory had also turned around, with solemn expressions on their faces. Judging from their formation, they were already surrounded. This black-maned giant pig is no longer a simple beast. Holt whispered. Well, it seems to be much stronger than the ordinary black-maned wild boar. Mallory nodded and asked, are you going to deal with it? Okay, you go help others. Holt replied. Mallory nodded and went to the other end. Shrink the formation and come behind me. At the same time, Holt shouted in a deep voice. The apprentices changed their formations one after another and came between the two. Roar. The black-maned giant pig king roared again, and the sound waves were mixed with inexplicable magic waves rolling in. After this roar, a hint of fatigue flashed undetectably in its violent eyes. However, there were still more than 20 black-maned giant pigs alive in the hall. At this time, their eyes turned red, and the wounds on their bodies that were already healing quickly healed even faster. The outer black mane also seems to be covered with a thin layer of black light. The defense becomes stronger and the recovery ability is strengthened. Now attacks from ordinary apprentices pose a great threat to them. Often the attack area would look dripping with blood 1 second, and then return to its intact appearance the next second. However, fortunately, Mallory was there to cover them, so they would not be rushed close by the giant black-maned pig in the hall. At this time, Colin also quickly added Hope's defensive force field to himself. Before that, he was concerned about the consumption of magic power and only used steel armor. No longer able to hide his strength, the frequency of his spears suddenly doubled. Other wizards also tried their best. In this way, the situation was stabilized by them for a moment. Colin also breathed a sigh of relief. After a while, under their slaughter, the number of black-maned giant pigs in the hall gradually decreased to less than 10, and victory was right in front of them. Mallory. But at this moment, Holt's shout came from behind. Mallory looked back quickly. Colin's heart skipped a beat and he glanced back subconsciously. Chapter 40 Curse. After seeing the scene clearly, his heart slowly dropped again. Under Holt's attack, the black-maned giant boar king was now bound in place by countless strange vines. He was already dripping with blood and was obviously at a disadvantage. Help me, Holt continued to add, continuing to apply magic. Only then did Colin notice that the vines wrapped around the giant pig king with black manes were breaking one by one. Mallory quickly cast a spell. But the giant pig king with black manes reacted faster than him. Roar. It roared suddenly, its basketball-sized eyes flashed with red light, its black mane instantly stood up like steel needles, and its muscles suddenly swelled. I saw it rush forward hard, with a stabbing sound, and all the remaining vines suddenly collapsed. Perhaps realizing that he was helpless, the giant black-maned pig king just glanced at Holt and others with a look full of hatred, then stopped fighting and turned around and ran away in an instant. The speed is extremely fast, and the distance is already more than 10 meters in the blink of an eye. Chase. Don't let it run away, otherwise there will be endless trouble. Holt quickly greeted Mallory. After you finish taking care of the remaining giant black bristle pigs, just wait where we come back. Mallory didn't hesitate, just gave a quick instruction to the other apprentices, and then chased after them with Holt. The situation in the hall is now clear. Even without him to hold the battle, the remaining intermediate apprentices can still deal with the few remaining black-maned giant pigs. On the other side, the dark forest has complex terrain and is full of dangers. What it has to deal with is a ferocious beast that is no weaker than an ordinary high-level wizard apprentice. Holt clearly needs his support more. As for letting it escape, that's obviously impossible. Not to mention that this black-maned wild boar king is a rare high-level ferocious beast and is worth a lot of money. Just because of the black-maned giant boar king's last hateful look, they still have to pursue it. No one wants to be thought about every day by a ferocious beast with the strength of a high-level wizard apprentice. Soon, Mallory followed Holt's figure and gradually disappeared around the far corner of the passage. The cave fell silent for a moment, and the remaining apprentices looked at each other in shock. But in an instant, the silence was broken by the roar of the remaining giant black-maned pigs. They no longer thought about it and continued to hunt down the remaining black-maned giant pigs. After some time, Colin slowly exhaled and put the spear in his hand back into the bag on his waist. At this time, there was only the last black-maned giant pig left in the cave hall. It was being attacked by an apprentice from the Chi Yuan gang. It was at the end of its strength and had only its last breath left. According to the tacit agreement, this giant pig belongs to him. No one interferes, they just watch quietly. But Colin seemed to have thought of something and glanced at Catherine not far away. But he hadn't turned his head completely yet. Roar. A familiar roar suddenly came. His heart skipped a beat and he quickly looked back behind him. A very familiar black-maned wild boar appeared at the corner of the passage in the distance. Why is it back again? Didn't Mr. Mallory and the others go after it? A member of the Chi Yuan gang subconsciously asked in panic. What should we do? It has the strength of a senior wizard apprentice, and we can't deal with it. Not the same one, someone next to him retorted. Indeed, it's not the same head. Colin judged after careful observation. The appearance of this black-maned giant pig is very similar to the previous black-maned giant pig king, but its size is slightly smaller. Boom. At this moment, the last giant pig in the cave hall was killed and fell. Now everyone has turned around and faced the new black-maned giant pig. A look of fear appeared on their faces. During the apprenticeship period, advancing to a senior apprenticeship is a hurdle. Generally speaking, perhaps a dozen or 20 junior wizard apprentices can deal with intermediate wizard apprentices. But a dozen or 20 intermediate wizard apprentices could not deal with the high-level wizard apprentices. Even if you encounter some stronger senior wizard apprentices, doubling the number of intermediate apprentices may not be enough to deal with them. At this moment, the passage they came from was blocked by the huge body of the new, slightly smaller, black-maned giant pig king. Looking back, I saw that there was no exit in the cave hall behind me, only a pool in the corner. And the slightly smaller black-maned giant pig king in front of them is obviously no weaker than the black-maned giant pig king just now, which is comparable to a senior wizard apprentice. Already reached a desperate situation. No time to think too much. If everyone doesn't unite, they will be defeated one by one, and it will be a dead end. Colin moved his lips slightly, about to suggest that everyone fight together. Whether it's the same enemy or not. No matter whether we can deal with it or not, we have no way out. Only by preparing to attack together can we have hope. Stop hiding it, and use whatever skills you have to suppress the situation. Someone made the suggestion before him. When he looked up, he saw that he was still familiar. It was Orlando, the fat and unattractive guy from the same team. A trace of physical pain flashed across his face. He gritted his teeth and took out a yellow witchcraft crystal from his arms and activated it with magic power. He held it in his hand and waved it with one hand. A thorn as thick as a bucket suddenly emerged from the ground in front of the giant black bristle pig. Roar. The black bristle giant pig was caught off guard and crashed directly into it, and its huge body was forced to stop. But the earth thorn was blocked by its thick skin and could not cause much damage. The apprentices present took this opportunity to attack with all their strength. Many people, like Orlando, took out the witchcraft crystals from the bottom of the box. Anyone who can become a second-class apprentice is not a fool, and no one among them does not understand the current situation. If you are stingy with magic stones and hide your trump card now when you have such a good opportunity, if you fail to deal with the giant black bristle pig later, it will be too late to use your trump card. Fireball, ice spike, acid, spear, wind blade. Countless witchcraft attacks of various shapes continued to shoot towards the black-maned giant pig that was temporarily fixed in place like a surge, exploding on it. The shock wave stirred up dust on the ground, causing smoke to billow for a while. It was actually somewhat difficult to see clearly the figure of the giant black bristle pig. After a while, the witchcraft crystal was used up and the attack slowed down slightly. The smoke in the distance gradually faded, and a pair of eyes like blood-red flames quietly emerged from the smoke. Roar. A violent cry suddenly sounded, blowing away the remaining smoke and dust. The figure of the black-maned giant pig became clearly visible, and its body was actually covered with strange lines at this time. The next second, it was breathing heavily, bending its legs slightly and leaning over. It's over. All the apprentices turned pale. Colin's pupils also shrank slightly, as if there was an invisible big hand holding his heart. He didn't have time to think too much and jumped to the right. But the black-maned wild boar is so fast that 1 second it was still in the smoke, and the next second it was already rushing forward. Even the speed of his great knight could not completely avoid it. Boom! His vision suddenly blurred, and by the time he reacted, he was already flying in the air, and the next second he fell heavily into the cave hall at the back like a slaughterhouse. There were 3 other people who had the same experience as him, all members of the Yuan gang. This should be because he was standing on the far left side of his team, next to the Yuan gang. The 3 Yuan gang members looked much worse than Colin, and they had basically lost the ability to move. The tonnage of the black bristle giant boar was no lighter than the heavy truck in the previous life, and the speed of the red pattern blessing was even faster than the heavy truck at that moment. The defensive witchcraft of ordinary intermediate wizard apprentices is simply unable to withstand such an impact. The apprentices of the Yuan gang only had half a breath left at most. But Colin relied on Hope's defensive force field, steel armor, and the knight's own blood armor, and in the end he only suffered some minor injuries. Boom! He fell to the ground and quickly turned over. Looking at the black-maned wild boar again, after this collision, it moved obviously slowly and seemed to have consumed a lot of energy. There is no time to hesitate, now is the time to fight back. It's dying, attack quickly. Colin took out the spear and shouted at Catherine and others. On the other side, Catherine and others had just recovered from the shock. The power of the black-maned giant boar's collision just now was far beyond what they could handle, and it was no less powerful than a full blow from a senior wizard apprentice. They were extremely lucky that the direction of the collision was not from their side. At this time, Orlando heard Colin's cry and subconsciously wanted to step forward to help. Willard and the remaining thin wizards of the Yuan gang followed closely behind. Boom! But as soon as they took a step, they heard a roar, and the cave passage behind them began to collapse. Orlando and others' expressions instantly changed, and they quickly turned back and rushed behind them. Colin also reacted at this moment, and he was shocked when he looked at the passage that collapsed for some reason. He rushed towards the passage in a hurry. Unfortunately, he was too far away from the passage. Boom! Before he could reach the passage, a huge rock fell to the ground with a deafening sound. Colin could only stop slowly in front of the gravel with a gloomy expression. At this time, roar! Thank you for watching. Continue exploring the fascinating world of Chinese novels with us. Hit that subscribe button on Chinese Novel Audiobook to stay updated with our latest stories, and never miss out on a great listen.